Tonight, we're exploring two lives in medieval Europe. A king draped in velvet, surrounded by courtiers, making laws with a nod, and a peasant waking cold, working hungry, surviving with grit and calloused hands. This story is about the gap between them, not just in power, but in purpose. One commands, the other obeys. One builds empires, the other keeps them running. If this calm history helps you unwind, feel free to like, subscribe, or comment where you're listening from. Now settle in, and let's begin with two lives that shaped the world, one silent chore at a time. You wake slowly, your back aching like someone's grinding a stone into your spine. The straw mattress beneath you is more mold than straw, unchanged for years, puffing dust and mildew when you move. You share it with your wife, two children, and maybe a rat or a squirrel. The roof leaks again, despite the clay patches you tried last autumn. A tin bowl catches the drip, sounding like a cruel clock. There's no fire, just cold ashes and the memory of last night's glow when you huddled under a coarse wool blanket with your youngest child. Your breath fogs in the air. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof that lets out smoke and lets in rain. Outside, something groans, maybe the wind, pigs, or your neighbor Edric splitting wood. You sit up, careful not to knock over the half-frozen bowl of water by the mattress. You break the ice with your fingers, splash your face, and it stings, waking you. You pull on your tunic, the same one as always, rough, patched, smelling of smoke and earth. A rope ties your waist since your belt broke last year. Your bare feet hit the dirt floor, no shoes, not since the soles wore out. Your home is one room, a hearth, tools on the wall, cloth scraps over windows. Privacy is a luxury. You live cheek to jowl with family and sometimes livestock, a goat by the door, chickens pecking inside. Your wife is asleep or pretending after being up with the feverish baby. Your son, only 10, is outside, coughing as he tends the fire pit. You grab a crust of hard barley bread, dip it in water to soften it, and chew. A crude saint's icon on the wall prompts a mumbled prayer in Latin you don't understand, but feels sacred. The rooster crows, Edric's, not yours. You stretch, your back pops, and the day begins with wood. Without it, there's no warmth, no cooking, no hope of boiling lice from clothes. You grab a dull hatchet and head to the woodpile. Gathering branches in the Lord's forest is technically illegal, but everyone does it, hoping the steward isn't watching. Mud clings to your feet, paths are just worn grooves. You slip, curse, and later you'll mend the fence, feed the pig, or bake at the village oven. But first, always wood. You nod to Edric, he grunts back. You've lived this day 100 times. The king wakes slowly, not from cold or pain, but because he can. His bed is enormous, draped in velvet, lined with furs, and stuffed with goose down from palace-raised birds. The room is warm, a fire fed all night by a servant. A valet enters quietly with warm water, another with a warmed robe, a third with a towel, a fourth with slippers, each bowing in sequence. This is routine. The king doesn't rise alone. He's dressed, washed, tended to. Even waking is political, with protocol dictating who enters, who speaks, who touches his garments. Sunlight filters through stained glass as he yawns, his feet never touching the ground. Slippers are slid on first. A servant holds a perfumed towel as he washes in rose-scented water. He checks his face in a silver mirror, sits while his beard is trimmed, hair combed, hands bombed. His clothes, gold-embroidered doublet, deep green hose, a fur-lined cloak, are symbols of wealth, dyed with costly pigments. Breakfast awaits in the solar. Fresh bread, honeyed figs, sausages, eggs, sweet and savory dishes. He may hear poetry, music, or scripture, or receive guests. A steward brings news, border reports, a bishop's letter, grain updates, but he waves it away for later. He sips wine, listens to a lute, and the world beyond the walls waits. Breakfast for the peasant is a pause, not a meal, carved from survival's relentless pace. The hearth's fire sulks as you poke embers and blow to spark a flame, feeding it kindling until it warms a clay pot. You ladle gray, lumpy porridge, barley, oats, a pinch of salt, into a chipped bowl. No milk. The cow died last winter. You tear off coarse bread, dense from rye and filler, dip it in the mush to soften it, and chew. Your children eat nearby, coughing, one staring into the bowl. You tell them to eat slowly, not because there's more, but to stretch the moment. Your wife drinks weak, bitter ale, safer than the stream that kills chickens and children. Sometimes breakfast has boiled onion or fat scraps, but not today. The pig was slaughtered, its part sent to the Lord. Edric coughs outside, already working. A muddy-faced child knocks, asking for herbs. Your wife trades nettles for bread. The sun climbs, and you wipe your hands on your tunic. The bowl returns to the shelf. The pot steams for later. That was breakfast, and now work. In the palace, breakfast is a display. The king enters the solar, where light spills through tall windows onto painted walls and Moorish rugs. Silver platters hold manchet bread, soft and white, made from sifted wheat, a luxury. Poached eggs, spiced sausages, figs from Iberia, and honeycomb sit beside cheese from distant lands. A food taster checks for poison. The king eats slowly, not for hunger, but to be seen. Attendants hover, musicians play, a steward reads the day's agenda, petitions, disputes, supply issues. He listens half-heartedly, chewing cinnamon poached pear. Spices like nutmeg cost more than a cow. He picks at a pastry, signals when done, and plates are cleared. A towel cleans his fingers. He strokes his greyhound's ears. Breakfast ends, not because he's full, but because he says so. The peasant's clothes are a single tunic, rough wool, patched, faded to mud straw anonymity. It scratches, the sleeves are frayed. A torn linen shirt lies unmended. Hose, sagging wool tubes, tie at the knee. You wear wooden clogs, better than frostbite. A rope belt holds it all together. Clothes hang on nails. Lice and fleas are constant. Sumptuary laws banned bright colors for peasants. You couldn't afford them anyway. Your wife wears a wool kirtle, her head covered for warmth and modesty. Your children wear patched hand-me-downs, the babies swaddled in rags. Dressing is no transformation, just layered misery against the cold. The king's garments are chosen and warmed by valets. Soft linen underclothes, dyed blue hose, a padded doublet with bone buttons, and a burgundy velvet cloak lined with for signal his status. His boots never touch mud. A silk sash drapes elegantly. Rings and a brooch with stones mark his sacred body. Attendants discuss weather and court while he dresses, a performance of power, thread by thread. A circlet, not a crown, reminds all who he is. You step outside, the cold stinging your nose. The yard is frozen ruts and straw, a limping chicken pecks near the woodpile. Your day is obligations. Check the pig, refill its trough with turnip skins and porridge scraps. Gather wood from the Lord's forest, haul it back, fetch water from a stream. You slip on icy stones, spill a bucket, and curse. Back home, your wife spins wool as the children huddle by the fire. You change into a less-holed tunic and head to the Lord's field for muck spreading, a feudal duty. The stench is vile, but you shovel unpaid for the Lord's future crops. Your own plot withers while you work his land. Lunch is a crust of bread, garlic, or dried turnip, eaten on a rock as the reeve rides by, his boots shining. There's always more work. The king's duties begin in the great hall, fragrant with herbs to mask crowded bodies. A scribe and steward present a noble's petition for a mill. He lets advisers argue, sipping wine from a crested goblet. Grievances pile up, taxes, roads, bandits. He nods, thinking of lunch. A messenger reports border trouble. He murmurs to wait until the harvest. A priest brings news of heresy. He leaves it to the Inquisition. A jester's joke draws polite laughs after his smirk. Petitions from commoners, a broken fence, grain disputes, are waved to the reeve. He looks forward to hunting, a break from talk. In his chamber, he dictates letters to a scribe, signing scrolls. His presence is enough. He is king. You're never clean. Dirt is in your mattress, clothes, food, blood. You splash cold, gray water from a bucket on your face. It wakes, but doesn't clean. Soap, rare and stinging, is gone. Bathing is a summer luxury. Water's carried bucket by bucket. Heating it burns precious wood. The church values soul over body, so you wash minimally. Rumors of Roman baths sound like fairy tales. Your fingernails stay dirty. Your feet crack, your knuckles chap. A rash lingers on your leg. Your wife crushes lice in the children's hair. The toilet is a frozen pit. You squat beside it. Tooth care is a mint sprig or nothing. Your teeth loosen, bleed. Disease is constant. Fevers, boils, coughs. The baby's forehead is warm. Fear lingers. You carry herbs for miasma, but the priest calls illness punishment. You smell of sweat, smoke, and labor, and you go on because there's no choice. The king wakes to fragrance. Herbs like thyme and lavender ward off illness. A servant wipes his face with rose-scented water. Another bathes him in a linen-lined tub with Castile soap and almond oil. His hair is brushed, nails trimmed, teeth cleaned with wine-soaked cloth. Physicians monitor his humors, advising against dampness or spoiled food. He's bled for balance, follows a health regimen. Illness brings care, leeches, tinctures, prayers. During plague he retreats, closes gates, funds masses. Cleanliness is visible, symbolic, managed by others. Leisure for you is rare, just pauses when your body aches too much. Stories by the fire, saints, demons, dragons, ease hunger. Songs, lewd, and local pastime. Festivals like St. Martin's bring roasted meat, dancing, ale. Games like Catch the Goose or wrestling offer pride. A traveling juggler or fire-swallowing performer draws a silent crowd. Ale, sour and weak, dulls the edge. You dance barefoot, laugh at bad jokes, sleep under trees. It's not much, but it's enough. The king's entertainment is power. Minstrels play in the solar. He waves them away when bored. Curated gardens and chess, with nobles, test his dominance. Hunting is theater. Horses, hawks, hounds, and peasants drive deer to his arrow. Feasts display abundance, with roasted boar and flowing wine. Jesters, acrobats, and plays entertain. A misstep risks exile. He listens to books, Rome, knights, theology, questioning idly. Constant entertainment leaves him bored. You wake hungry, stirring yesterday's pottage, barley, turnip, wilted leaf. You give the bigger share to your child. Hard rye bread with grit wears your teeth. Ale, weak and cloudy, is safer than water. Meat is rare, a monthly scrap boiled with roots. Poaching risks punishment. Eggs and cheese are summer treats. Holy days bring goose or honeyed apples, memories you savor. You trade leeks for butter, eat local herbs, thyme, mustard. Meals are work, eaten in silence, to fuel more work. The king's meals are theater. Kitchens churn out white manchet bread, roasted boar, venison, and spice pies. Silver dishes hold fish, eels, and almond milk, or whale on fast days. Spices like saffron cost more than gold. Goblets of imported wine shine. Feasts last hours, with pastry castles or live birds and pies. Physicians watch his humors. Attendants serve, taste, clear. He eats to show power, not hunger. You pray to saints, their names blurring, Catherine, Isidore, Jude. You cross yourself, mumble the Lord's Prayer, not understanding Latin. Church is cold stone, candles, and echoes. You kneel, stand, say amen by rhythm. The priest, with his goose and shoes, speaks of sin. You fast on Fridays, celebrate feast days, tie herbs for luck, fear witches or clever women. Belief shapes fear, keeps you sane. The king kneels on cushions in a marble chapel, holding a gold-illuminated psalter. His faith is political, tied to divine right. He funds monasteries, appoints clerics, observes holy days with incense and chants. The church is ally and rival. He fears omens, wears relics, consults astrologers. During plague, he orders prayers, retreats, funds masses. Belief upholds his rule. You're a serf, bound to the land, not free. You owe the Lord days of labor, muck stalls, mend fences, harvest his grain, before your own plot. Spring plants, summer reaps, autumn preserves, winter endures. You eat gritty bread, pottage, ale. Taxes take a tenth of your crop. Fees it for the Lord's mill or oven. Your wife and children work too. Small joys, a straight furrow, a dry roof, eggs. Hey there, tonight we're not walking in the footsteps of lords or knights. We're moving quietly through the shadows with the servants who made the castle run while rarely being seen. The scullery made scrubbing before dawn, The spit boy turning meat until his arms go numb, the laundress with frozen hands, the guard pacing in silence while everyone else sleeps. This is their story, not one of glory or grandeur, but of relentless work, aching limbs, and quiet strength. 10 lives, 10 days, all under one roof, but in entirely different worlds. If this kind of soft, grounded history helps you unwind, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it truly brings you peace. Drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing how far these quiet stories travel. So take a deep breath, let the fire crackle, dim the lights, and let's begin, not with royalty, but with those who serve beneath them. Good morning. You're awake, not because you've had enough sleep, don't be ridiculous, but because the stone floor you were using as a mattress has successfully leached the last bit of warmth from your body. Also, the cook stepped on you twice. That's just how your day begins when you're the lowest-ranking life form in a medieval castle. Welcome to the thrilling career of a scullery maid. You are unpaid, unwashed, and largely unnoticed, unless someone needs something cleaned or someone else to blame. You sleep beside the hearth because it's the only warm place in the kitchen, and by warm, we mean marginally less cold than outside. Your bedding is a burlap sack filled with straw that has seen better decades. It smells like burnt fat, wet wood, and crushed ambition. Your shift, that's your one piece of clothing, is made of coarse, undyed wool that doubles as both pajamas and uniform. It's been boiled maybe twice this year, probably once, possibly never. You rise before the sun, before the roosters, before God, it seems. Why? Because everything that needs to happen before the nobles wake, fire, water, bread, cleaning, is your responsibility. Technically not yours alone, but let's be honest, the other girls know how to hide when work is handed out. You haven't learned that trick yet, or maybe you just weren't born slippery enough. The hearth is dead. The embers have gone cold overnight. That's bad. A scullery without fire is like a knight without armor. Still dangerous, but mostly just pathetic. You shuffle outside into the pitch-black courtyard, barefoot, because your shoes disintegrated last spring and were repurposed as door insulation. The flagstones are wet and jagged. You gather kindling with hands too numb to feel splinters. Back inside, you crouch by the hearth and begin coaxing flame from damp wood and angry thoughts. Eventually, the fire crackles to life, and you hold your fingers above it until they stop resembling corpse fingers. You're now ready for your next task, water. The castle does not have plumbing. It has you. You haul wooden buckets from the well, gallons and gallons of water, heavy and sloshing, balanced on a yoke across your narrow shoulders. It takes multiple trips. Your arms burn, your back screams, your knees wobble like boiled barley, and you haven't even reached breakfast yet. By the time the kitchen staff starts filtering in, yawning, stretching, scratching, you're on your 4th trip to the well. No one thanks you. No one even makes eye contact. You are furniture with legs, that's all. The cook bursts in like a thunderclap, in a bad mood, sweating already, barking orders, and armed with a wooden spoon that's been repurposed as a disciplinary device. She shouts something about the stew pot still being crusty. That's your cue to start scrubbing again. You scrub pots until your knuckles bleed. No soap, of course, that's for rich people and sinners. You use ashes, sand, and lye if someone remembers to make it. The lye burns, so does the ash in its own gritty way. You've developed something between a callus and a chemical burn on your right hand. The left one's worse. The scullery is a room of punishment disguised as a workspace. There's no ventilation. The one window is permanently clogged with soot. Everything smells like meat that's been boiled too long, and something else you don't want to identify. You spend most of your day hunched over basins, scraping grease from pewter trenchers and slapping rats off the table with a ladle. Let's talk about rats. They run this place. You just work here. Mid-morning arrives. You haven't eaten. There's a heel of bread in your apron, hidden and dry as chalk. You gnaw on it behind the doorway, trying not to look guilty. You fail. A kitchen maid spots you, reports you, and now you're assigned to latrine pot duty for the rest of the week. Congratulations. Later, you get promoted to onion duty, which is just a fancy way of saying cry professionally for 2 hours. You chop onions until your face is a waterfall. No one asks if you're okay. Everyone assumes you're just weeping from your station in life. Around noon, the nobles take their first meal of the day. You carry in dishes, step precisely where you've been told, and do not make eye contact under any circumstances. Nobles don't like to be reminded that servants have eyes or faces or thoughts. You hold a pitcher for a full hour and are never asked to pour. Your arms go numb, that's normal. After the meal, you clean again, the same trenchers, now slick with gravy, bones tossed carelessly under the table, half-eaten pies, chewed grapes, and something that may have once been a fish. You scrape it all into the slop bucket. You're not allowed to keep scraps, but you might sneak one, just once, just the crust, just the edge, just enough to keep standing. Afternoon blurs into evening. You haul more water, peel more roots, mop the floor, sweep the hall. You get blamed for the dog vomiting in the solar, even though you've never even seen the solar. Doesn't matter, you were there spiritually. As the sun sets, dinner prep begins. It's louder now, hotter, the hearth blazing, smoke filling the rafters. Someone drops a pot, the cook screams, a fire nearly starts. You slap it out with your apron and keep moving. You're allowed to eat again, this time from a shared bowl passed between 5 girls. The stew is mostly liquid, a floating root, a grain of barley, and a suspicious chunk that might be squirrel. Doesn't matter, you eat it. It's food. Finally, dinner is served to the nobles. You stand nearby, again a background character in someone else's pageant. Your feet are soaked, your back is locked, you haven't spoken in hours except to say, "Yes, cook," "Sorry, cook," or "It won't happen again, cook," whether or not you know what happened. Night falls, dishes again, more scrubbing, bones stuck to the pan like medieval cement. Your hands are shaking now, not from cold, from exhaustion. You're dismissed with a grunt. You crawl back to your sack near the hearth. The fire has dimmed to glowing embers. You press close to the stone for warmth. Your tunic is still damp. You smell like smoke, onions, and fatigue. Someone's already asleep beside you. Someone else is crying quietly. You don't ask who. You don't want to know. You lie there for a moment, not asleep, not quite awake, thinking about what came before this. You didn't choose this life. No one chooses to be a scullery maid. You were born into it. Your mother worked in the dairy until her back gave out. Your aunt did laundry until she caught fever from the river. Now it's your turn. You're part of the great medieval inheritance. Suffering passed down like a ladle. There's no path up. You don't become a cook. You don't marry the steward. You don't get promoted to lady's maid and learn embroidery under soft candlelight. That's fiction. You grow older, your hands get worse, eventually you're too slow to scrub the pots, and they replace you with someone younger, cheaper, and less likely to fall asleep standing up. So you pay attention to the little things, the rhythm of the kitchen, the shifting alliances between servants, the unspoken rules of survival. Never correct the cook, always share the driest part of the bread with the girl who's bleeding. Stay out of the steward's way. If you hear a noble's footsteps behind you, move immediately or risk being trampled, physically or socially. There's gossip, of course, the only currency the servants have. Someone swears the chamberlain is sleeping with the lady in waiting. Someone else says he's in love with the choir boy. Someone saw the knight with the red beard eat 5 figs and throw up into his own helmet. That one is probably true. When there's a wedding or a feast, it's chaos. 3 times the guests, 10 times the work, and no time for anything but frantic scrubbing and silent praying. The nobles celebrate, you blister. By the end of those nights, you're not even tired, you're hollow. And then there's winter, the worst of it. You work through your own cough, your own fever. You wear the same shift for weeks, layered with scraps. There are days when the water in your bucket freezes before you can get back to the kitchen. You keep going anyway, because if you stop, someone else takes your spot, and because you've been told that suffering without complaint is a virtue, especially for girls like you. You used to have a name. People used to say it. Now you're just girl, or you there. You're not special. You're not a hero. You're just another invisible cog in the castle machine. And yet, the castle runs because of you, because you get up before the sun, because you know how to quiet a squeaky hinge with goose grease, because you remember which bucket is clean and which one holds the mop water, because you scrub the pans until they shine like coins you'll never hold. No statue will ever be carved for you, no song sung, but if you disappeared tomorrow, the kitchen would fall apart in a week. You don't sleep well, you twitch, you ache. Your dreams are strange and half-formed, sometimes of green fields, sometimes of boats sailing away, sometimes of nothing at all. You wake with your mouth dry and your arms heavy. Another day begins, another day exactly like the last, and no one notices except maybe Lord Crumbs. You are the spit boy. Congratulations or condolences. It really depends on how much you enjoy rotating slowly in front of open flame while contemplating your life choices. You're somewhere between 8 and 12 years old, small enough to crouch under the hearth, old enough to not cry every time you burn yourself. You were either orphaned, sold, or your parents were very persuasive when it came to convincing you this was an opportunity. Your job is to sit on a stool, if you're lucky enough to have one, beside the great kitchen hearth and turn the spit all day, slowly, clockwise, mostly, until someone tells you otherwise. Sometimes you're told to stop, sometimes you're told you're turning too fast or too slow, or that you weren't turning it with enough noble dignity. Once someone accused you of cheekiness because you blink too often. It's hot, hot in a way that feels unnatural, like living inside a loaf of bread that's halfway through baking. Your cheeks are constantly flushed, your hair is always damp, your tunic singed at the hem smells like every type of meat that's ever passed through this kitchen. You used to like the smell of roasting duck, now it gives you migraines. Burns are constant, blisters everywhere. The kitchen has no sympathy. You're just expected to get better at dodging. If you blister your palm, wrap it in a rag. If your eyebrows singe off, grow new ones. If you faint, try to land somewhere that won't spill anything. You don't get breaks. The meat doesn't care if your arms are tired. The fire doesn't care if you're sweating so hard it's dripping into your eyes. The nobles expect their roast goose to spin at the correct angle and pace, or heads will metaphorically roll, sometimes literally, depending on how drunk the steward is. On special feast days, the spit gets longer, bigger birds, whole pigs, once an entire deer. It took two of you to turn it. Your partner had a lazy eye and a mean streak. He'd let go of the crank at random intervals just to watch you panic. You haven't seen him in a while. Rumor has it he's been reassigned to the kennels. You hope the dogs are treating him fairly. You sit for hours in the same position. Your knees go numb, your back knots up. One time your foot fell asleep, so hard you thought you'd gone lame. The steward called you dramatic and threw a turnip at your head. The kitchen is chaos, shouting, boiling, clanging, people running into each other with trays of oysters and jugs of wine. You are the eye of the storm. Nobody thanks you, nobody remembers you, but if that roast comes out uneven, someone will blame the boy who turned it. When the meat is finally declared done, you help pull it off the spit, carefully. The fat sizzles, the grease drips. If you flinch, you get scolded. If you hesitate, you get slapped. Then it's on to the next roast, or the stew, or the pies, or the boiling cauldron that smells like fermented onions and despair. You don't really know what time is, ever. Your entire life is firelight and hunger. Sometimes, if you're lucky, someone throws you a bone, literally, not a metaphor, a half-gnawed bone with just enough meat on it to pretend you had lunch. You eat it in the corner with your hands, hunched like a little animal, and then go back to turning. By late afternoon, the fire has turned your cheeks red and your lips dry and cracked. Your hands are black with soot. You've inhaled so much smoke that you cough like someone 4 times your age. You're still rotating. You hear the sound of plates clattering and nobles laughing in the hall above. You'll never go there. You're not allowed. That room is clean and bright and full of soft chairs and white bread. You exist so they don't have to. Eventually, the feasting ends. That doesn't mean you're done. It means you now get to help carry trays of half-eaten meat back down to the kitchen. You don't get to eat it. You carry it, you scrape bones into a slop bucket, rinse goblets, and drag the roasting spit into the scullery for cleaning. It's heavy. Your shoulder aches. You pretend you don't feel the blister bursting under your palm. Someone shouts that the Lord wants a roast prepared for his hounds. You start the process all over again. The dogs will eat better than you tonight, again. It's late now. Your tunic is stuck to your skin, your hair is stiff with grease, your hands are shaking. And not just from fatigue, from hunger too. You finally get a bowl of pottage. It's thin, just boiled grain and a few soft turnips. You slurp it down in the corner. You don't talk to anyone. There's nothing to say. Everyone's too tired to pretend they're people. You clean the tools, dull knives, the spit, the hooks. Everything must be spotless before the steward rounds. If he finds a smear of fat, you're scrubbing it with your own spit if you're lucky. If not, you're on floor duty in the Lord's privy the next day. Night settles like smoke. The kitchen quiets. The last pots clatter into place. The cook finally stops yelling. You sit near the dying fire, too sore to lie down, too wired to sleep. A rat crawls past. You don't flinch. You're too tired to care. You think about your old life before the castle. You were a shepherd's son, maybe, or your parents ran a mill. Maybe they still do, maybe they forgot you. Or maybe they were just desperate. One less mouth to feed. There's no path out of this. The best you can hope for is that your burns heal properly, and that your back doesn't twist too early. If you're lucky, maybe you'll graduate to assistant cook by age 20, if you survive that long. Winter is especially cruel. The castle walls are thick, but the draft still cuts through like a blade. Your station by the hearth should be a blessing. Warmth, light fire. But it's not warmth, it's exposure. One side of your body roasts while the other side freezes. You rotate like the meat, a human kebab of fatigue and frostbite. You don't have proper shoes. You wrap your feet in scraps and try not to stand in puddles when you walk. Your knees pop like old door hinges when you crouch. You wonder if you'll ever uncrouch. There are days your fingers are so stiff from cold and burns you can't tell if you're holding the spit or it's holding you. And your health, you don't have that. Your cough has become part of your personality. Your skin peels from heat rash, then cracks from cold air. You smell constantly of scorched fat, which sounds delicious but makes people avoid you. You've burned the same forearm so many times it looks like overcooked pork. No one offers a remedy. The apothecary is for nobles. You're told to rub it with pig lard and keep turning. The hierarchy in the kitchen is strict. You are beneath the kitchen maids, beneath the butcher's assistant, beneath the boy who fetches eggs. You are the lowest. Even the dog that begs for bones is higher than you. At least it gets scraps sometimes. The steward nods at you. That's the highlight of your week. You wonder, not often, but sometimes, what your life might look like if you ever left. Then you remember, spit boys don't leave. They either grow up to be other kinds of servants, or they don't grow up at all. You settle into your spot by the hearth again, legs folded, arms hugging your knees. The flames are lower now, but your skin still burns where yesterday's blisters cracked open. You stare into the coals and imagine what it might feel like to be warm without hurting. You don't know, you've never felt that. Outside, snow is falling. Inside, meat is sizzling. And in between them, forgotten and ignored, you keep turning, like you always do. You know how every castle or town needs someone to deal with the human waste. That's you. You're a gong farmer, which is a polite medieval way of saying professional human filth remover. If it goes in the chamber pot, you take it out. If it ends up in the latrine, you get it back out again. You are the bottom of the bottom, scraping the literal cesspit of society. And somehow, it's a real job. One that paid better than some others. But before you get excited, remember it paid better, because no one else wanted to do it. Your shift starts at night, not because you're nocturnal, but because no one wants to smell or see you during the day. You're banned from public markets until you've bathed, not that bathing helps. The stink doesn't wash off. It lives in your pores now. You're the reason people cross the street and pretend they didn't see you. Your tools, a rake, a bucket, and a shovel. Your uniform, layers of thick wool stuffed with moss, and whatever you can find to try and block the smell. It doesn't work. The smell finds a way. It always does. Your job is simple. Go to the cesspits, dig out the compacted, fermented, semi-liquid remains of everything the castle or town has flushed into the earth for the last 6 months, and get it out before it overflows into the streets. You climb down into the pit. Yes, down, ladder optional, rope if you're lucky. The smell hits you like a brick wall dipped in sewage and fermented despair. It burns your eyes, coats your tongue, and makes you wonder what choices in life led you here. You breathe through your mouth, but it doesn't help. Now you can taste it. You descend slowly, boots squelching on the moist slope of decomposing waste. The pit is ankle-deep in places, knee-deep in others, and bottomless in imagination. You rake through it all. The recent stuff is bad, but the older layers, that's where the nightmares live. Gray sludge, black crusts, slick masses that burble and shift as if they're thinking about becoming sentient. You don't ask questions, you dig. And what are you digging through? Human waste, of course, animal waste, broken chamber pots, straw soaked with fluids you'll never identify, bits of food, bits of cloth, the occasional dead rat, the occasional dead other thing. Once you've found a chicken, you still don't know how it got down there. You buried it with some dignity. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you find coins dropped from nobles who used the latrine in a hurry. You pocket them. You've earned it. Once your bucket is full, you haul it out. You dump it into your cart, an open wooden box on wheels that creaks like it resents you. You repeat this process a dozen times, more if the castles had a feast recently. And you always do it at night, under torchlight, because the people above don't want to see the cost of their comfort. You work in silence. No one talks in a cesspit. Once your cart is full of what medieval records gently call night soil, you roll it through the quiet streets. The wheels leave tracks. The air behind you wilts. If anyone sees you, they gag or mutter a prayer. One kid once threw a cabbage at you. You threw something back. You're not proud of it. You head outside the town walls to the dumping grounds, usually near the fields, because, guess what? Waste gets reused. All that filth you collect becomes fertilizer. The very same nobles, who won't look you in the eye, are unknowingly eating vegetables grown in their own refuse. That's what you call medieval recycling. By early morning, you're done dumping, but not done working. You return to clean your tools, which means rinsing them in a pond that's already halfway ruined. You wash your boots, your clothes, your hands. It doesn't help. The stink clings. Your neighbors can always tell what shift you've worked. Some won't sit near you at meals. Some won't even share a table. You try not to let it get to you. You tell yourself it's honest work, important work. If you stop showing up, the entire castle would flood in filth within the week. You're not a hero, but you're what stands between society and ankle-deep disaster. You eat alone most days. Your bread tastes like ash, not because it's burned, just because everything smells like ash and worse now. You drink ale because the water's not safe, and because, frankly, being sober around your own job is a kind of masochism. Winter is the worst, not because it's cold, though it is, but because everything freezes. The waste freezes, your hands freeze, your breath turns to steam, and then to regret. You've got to hack through icy crusts with a shovel just to reach the warm, steaming horror beneath. It's the only time you'll ever see something warm and be upset about it. Summer isn't better. Summer bakes everything. The stench gets airborne, flies swarm. Wasps show up for reasons you don't understand. You sweat so much it soaks through your shoes. You've tried everything to mask the smell, vinegar, crushed herbs, even rubbing yourself with mint leaves. All it does is make the stench floral. People joke about you behind your back. Smells like a gong farmer is an insult. Some people assume you're stupid. You're not. You know how to brace a ladder with one leg while hauling 40 pounds of waste up a rope with the other. You know which side of the pit is safer to stand on after rain. You know which torch oils don't explode when dropped into methane pockets. That's science or something like it. And here's the kicker. You make more money than most servants. Yep, this is one of the few medieval jobs that actually paid well. Not luxuriously. You still live in a one-room hut on the edge of town, but better than a cook's helper or a baker's boy. Because no one else wants to do what you do, ever. They'd rather starve than crawl through what you crawl through. That's your leverage, your curse, your wage. By night's end, you're done. You drag your empty cart back to the yard, lean your shovel against the wall, and sit down on a log, not because it's clean, but because it's there. You sleep outside when the smell gets too bad. Your wife, if you have one, insists. Your kids say you smell like boiled cabbage and sin. You can't argue, they're right. You close your eyes, but the scent stays, it always stays. You smell it even in your dreams. Your hands don't look like hands anymore. The skin is always cracked, the fingernails black from grime, no matter how long you soak them. The calluses stay. You stop trying to scrub them clean. The soap costs more than your dignity used to. You used to be able to smell flowers, grass, firewood, not anymore. Your nose is broken, not physically, but spiritually. All you can ever smell now is rot. If a cart of apples rolled past you, you'd think they'd gone off. You've been rewired. Sometimes the castle guards joke with you. They say things like "don't fall in," and laugh like that's the first time you've heard it. You smile politely and pretend it's funny. Once, one of them shoved you near the edge of the pit for a laugh. You didn't smile that time. You have dreams rarely about becoming something else, a baker, maybe a scribe. But when you wake up, your hands still smell like last night, and so you rinse your face, adjust your sackcloth tunic, and walk back to the pit. Because even in dreams, someone has to carry the bucket. As the sky turns gray and the roosters begin their song, you haul your last bucket, scrape your last shoe, and exhale into the morning. The castle will wake soon, oblivious. The nobles will relieve themselves into gilded bowls, unaware of what happens after. And you'll vanish into shadow again, like the stink you carry. That's your job, that's your role, that's your day. The gong farmer, cleaner of kingdoms, forgotten by all, remembered only by the flies. You wear shoes. That alone makes you higher in rank than 3/4 of the castle staff. They're stiff leather, curled at the toe, and they squeak when you walk, which is unfortunate, because silence is part of your job. You're the apprentice to the chamberlain, which means you carry ledgers, memorize inventories, and pretend to understand what the words protocol and accountability really mean. You're not noble, of course, don't get any ideas. You're a servant, but you're a servant with access. You enter rooms others only clean. You witness things most peasants couldn't spell. You fetch parchment, write numbers, and maintain calm when the countess is screaming that her linens smell like goat. Your day begins before the lords rise. You wake in the servants' hall near the good fire, the one not used for cooking rats or heating piss buckets. You splash water on your face, comb your hair with your fingers, and brush your tunic clean with your own sleeve. Presentation matters. First task, candles. You walk along hallways, replacing stubs with fresh tallow tapers. Beeswax is for the chapel and the great hall only. Everyone else gets the cheap stuff that smells faintly of sheep. As you move from room to room, you note anything out of place. That's your second job, to notice. If the salt cellar is low, you write it down. If the wine stock is 2 casks short, you investigate. If the chamber pot in the guest room is full, you find someone else to deal with it. Say, you delegate downwards. It's tradition. The chamberlain is already awake, of course. He never sleeps, it seems. He's a narrow man with a sharp nose and sharper expectations. He smells faintly of ink and dried lavender. His robes are always spotless, and he always knows when you've made a mistake, sometimes before you make it. He speaks in lists. 2 bolts of woolen broadcloth for barrels of lamp oil. 1 visiting friar with dietary demands bordering on heresy. You nod, write it all down, and pray you don't spill ink again. Last time you did, he made you recopy an entire month's ledger by candlelight while the steward watched and chewed pickled herring directly into your ear. Your job is part clerk, part courier, part scapegoat. When the linens go missing, it's your fault. When the firewood is damp, it's your fault. When the Lord's hunting dog defecates in the guest stairwell, somehow, still your fault. Mid-morning is for inspections. You follow the chamberlain through halls and chambers like a silent, scribbling ghost. He taps walls, lifts bed covers, tastes wine, sniffs rushes. You nod and record. You try not to sigh. Once, you caught yourself yawning and spent the rest of the day organizing dry peas by size and color. You envy no one in this castle, except maybe the cook's dog, who at least gets to bark without consequence. Lunch is not a break, it's a logistical nightmare. Who eats what, when, and where, and who is seated 2 spots away from whom, so no one accidentally reignites a blood feud over pigeon pie. You carry seating charts, correct titles, and gentle reminders that Lady Cressida is no longer speaking to Lord Auric since the Lent wine incident. After the meal, the Chamberlain reviews accounts. You sit across from him in the solar, reading aloud each line item: wax, fish, salt, horseshoes, ink, wool, barley, mead, soap, barley again. The list never ends. Occasionally, he asks you for the weight of a cask or how many loaves can be cut from a stone of flour. If you hesitate, he raises one eyebrow. You'd rather be slapped. Then come the visitors, nobles from another estate, a wandering knight, some distant cousin who's somehow always between holdings. They arrive with trunks and egos and dietary needs. You show them to their chambers and take careful notes on what linens they receive, not because anyone will thank you, but because someone will absolutely blame you when they vanish. You're also responsible for the castle's keys, or more accurately, for fetching them. The armory key, the wine cellar key, the upstairs wardrobe key that fits nowhere, but is still important. You carry them in a pouch tied tightly to your belt, and you touch them reflexively, like prayer beads. Losing them would be a career-ending scandal, possibly a beating, possibly exile, possibly worse, permanent latrine duty. By late afternoon, the lists have turned to logistics. A shipment of salted herring is late, a bolt of velvet has gone missing, a priest drank too much and is asleep on the chapel floor, the kitchen is out of vinegar, the stables need more hay, the steward has opinions. You listen, you nod, and you draft a polite response in the chamberlain's hand. Sometimes you draft love notes. Yes, really. There's a noble lady who insists on communicating only via letters. She dictates them to you behind a curtain while feeding her lapdog strawberries soaked in cream. You write what she says, edit out the madness, and deliver the wax-sealed nonsense to a knight who blushes like a baker's oven every time he opens one. Evening approaches, candles again. You pass through the halls with a taper and a snuffer, relighting what's gone out, trimming what's burned too low. The halls are quieter now. The nobles drink, the servants breathe, and you are somewhere in between, not invited to either world, but required in both. You check on the guest rooms again, fluff the rushes, straighten the curtains, ensure that no one has died, spilled wine, or eloped without proper documentation. By now, your feet hurt, your head pounds, and your fingers are stained with wax and ink. You haven't eaten since morning, but you won't eat until the chamberlain finishes his supper and dismisses you. Sometimes he forgets. You sit outside his chamber for an hour while he recounts stories from his youth to a bored page boy who probably dreams of becoming a knight. You doze with your chin in your palm and your stomach caving in. Eventually, the door opens. You're dismissed with a flick of 2 fingers. You bow, murmur thanks, and retreat to the servants' quarters. Your bunk is narrow, the fire's out. Someone else has stolen your blanket again. You lie down, still half-dressed, and stare at the ceiling. You wonder if this is what power smells like: tallow, ink, sweat, and lavender. You used to think working near the nobles would be exciting, that you'd hear secrets, learn how power works. You've heard the secrets, all right, mostly about hemorrhoids, stolen pastries, and who thinks whom is insufferable. As for power, it's just more rules, more ways to fail. The chamberlain says you're learning discipline. What you're learning is exhaustion, how to be invisible, indispensable, and ignored at the same time. You've become fluent in silence, skilled in being present but forgettable. There's talk of promotion. Maybe one day you'll be assistant to the steward or manage to sell her books. More likely, you'll keep doing this until your back gives out or your eyes go bad from reading numbers by candlelight. There's no pension, just a slower decline. And still you show up because your work keeps the chaos stitched together, because the castle doesn't run without you, because someone needs to make sure the salt stock matches the winter ration plans, and because if you don't, someone will notice. You drift off to sleep, counting barrels in your head. You dream in inventory. You wake when the first bell rings. It's still dark. You stand up, stretch your aching legs, and adjust your squeaky shoes. It's time to relight the candles and begin again. The other servants tolerate you, barely. You're not one of them, not anymore. You wear cleaner clothes. You use words like allocation and inventory, but you're not one of the nobles either. They forget your name even as you light their hearts and refill their inkwells. You exist in the gap, a walking reminder that power trickles down slowly and responsibility floods upward. And still you show up, because showing up is what keeps the castle standing. And tomorrow, like today, you'll carry the lists, count the candles, and be blamed for everything that goes wrong. You start your day in a barn that never quite sleeps. The horses stir before the sun rises, snorting clouds of steam into the frozen air. Hooves clattering softly in stalls layered with straw, and the occasional rat. You are the stable boy. That means you shovel, you brush, you haul, you get kicked, often, but mostly you apologize to creatures that outrank you in both grace and nutrition. You sleep in the loft above the main stable, if you can call it sleep. The floorboards are thin, and the horses below never stop shifting. You hear everything. A tail swishing, a hoof stomping, the unmistakable sound of something large defecating very close to your pillow. Your hands are already cracked before dawn. You pull on the same stiff boots, the same sour-smelling tunic, and climb down the ladder. The cold hits you like a slap from God. You start mucking out the stalls, one by one, shovel, pitch, shovel again. It's not glamorous, it's not even tolerable, but it has to be done before the master of horse arrives, or else you'll spend the morning with a split lip and a lecture on discipline. You work fast, but not too fast. Moving too quickly spooks the horses, and spooked horses are worse than angry nobles. They bite, rear, and crush. You've already broken 2 fingers, and once got a hoof to the ribs that left you coughing blood for a week. Still, you love them, the animals. They don't lie, they don't yell, they don't pretend to be better than you. The stable smells like hay, manure, sweat, and horse, which is somehow worse and better than anything inside the castle. You don't mind it anymore. You've stopped smelling things the way regular people do. You know the scent of a healthy stallion versus one with colic. You can tell when a horse is nervous just by how it breathes. These animals make more sense than most people. After the stalls are cleared, you fetch feed. Heavy sacks of oats and hay bales stacked high in the loft. You lower them one by one, careful not to twist your back again like last winter. You nearly passed out and the master said, "He's faking it," before throwing a bridle at your head. Feeding is a delicate dance. Some horses are greedy, some are shy, some will bite your hand if you reach at the wrong moment. You've got scars to prove it. You pat their necks, check their hooves, and whisper nonsense to keep them calm. They know your voice. They trust you more than most nobles ever will. Mid-morning means grooming. You brush, curry, clean hooves, and untangle manes. You pluck burrs, wipe noses, and scoop more dung than you care to count. If the Lord is riding, you polish the tack until it gleams, not because he'll notice, but because the master of horse will, and if anything is amiss, it's your hide that gets tanned, not the leather. Sometimes the nobles bring dogs into the stable, hunting dogs, loud, twitchy things with more pedigree than sense. You clean up after them too. No one ever says thank you. When the Lord decides to ride, and he always decides last minute, everything changes. The stable turns into a whirlwind. You saddle his best gelding, the one that doesn't like to be touched. You check the straps 3 times, wipe the bit with a cloth, make sure the stirrups are exactly how he likes them. Too short, of course, because fashion over function is eternal. Then you stand aside, quiet and invisible, while he mounts. If the horse fidgets, it's your fault. If he slips in the mud, it's your fault. If he falls and breaks a nail, it's probably still your fault. You'll hear about it for weeks. In the meantime, you fetch fresh water, sweep the yard, and stack more hay. The smell of leather and sweat clings to your skin. Your shoulders ache, your arms throb. You've pulled muscles you didn't know existed and bled in places that shouldn't. You get a break, sometimes, but it's not restful. You sit on a stool, sip warm ale from a tin cup, and stare at the dust motes drifting through the air like exhausted ghosts. You don't talk, your jaw hurts from clenching it, your body hurts from existing, but the horses still need brushing. In winter, it's worse. Your fingers go numb, even inside gloves. The troughs freeze. You break ice with a hammer just to get them a drink. Sometimes you wonder if anyone inside the castle even knows the stable has no insulation. In summer, you're a walking blister. You sweat through your tunic, your shirt, your soul. Evening arrives with flies, clouds of them. They gather in the corners of the stable. buzzing like tiny curses. You swat them away half-heartedly while cleaning out the last stalls. One of the older mares has soiled her bedding 3 times today. She's nervous. Bad weather's coming. You feel it in your joints, the way the air shifts. You know before the sky even darkens. You sweep again, you rake again, you scrub the troughs with a fistful of straw and an old brush that lost its bristles 2 years ago. No one replaces it, no one notices, but you. The master of horse checks in one last time. He grunts if he's pleased, yells if he's not. You've learned to measure your day in the distance between his voice and your face. You sneak a few carrots from a feed room, one for the gray mare who doesn't bite, one for the chestnut who only bites strangers. They nuzzle your hand with soft, velvet noses. It's the closest thing to affection you get. When the sun goes down, you climb the ladder to the loft again. Your bed is a pile of rags and straw. It smells like mildew and saddle oil. You lie down in your clothes. There's no point undressing. You'll only have to put it all back on in 5 hours. You listen to the horses breathing, the wind pressing against the wooden slats. You count hoofbeats in your dreams. You'll be up before dawn again. No one at court knows your name. They call you boy, even though you're nearly 17 and your back creaks like a drawbridge. When you pass in the halls, they wrinkle their noses, not because you're rude, but because you smell like a life they don't want to imagine. Still, some nod. The kitchen maid leaves you crusts. The blacksmith grunts a greeting. Once, a knight gave you a silver coin because you calmed his stallion before battle. You still have it. You don't plan to spend it. It's proof that you're not invisible. You're not stupid. You know you won't rise high. There's no ladder from stable boy to steward. No horse brush that turns into a sword. You're not going to become a knight, not even a squire. But you know animals, and that's something. You know how to wrap a wound, calm a foal, spot a lame leg before it gets worse. You matter in a quiet way. You've seen what happens to boys who can't take it. They leave, or break, or disappear one night after a whipping. No one asks questions. You do your job and keep your head down. In bad weather, the stables leak. In summer, the hay rots. In winter, your breath ices on the rafters. But the horses are still there, waiting, breathing, trusting. And that's enough. Not always, but most days. So you close your eyes, listening to the weight of hooves and straw, the creak of wood, and the soft breath of creatures that never judge you. Tomorrow it starts again. You are the stable boy, and the horses need you. You don't stay for the praise. There isn't any. You stay because the horses know your voice, because they nicker when they hear your boots, because in a world full of orders, lies, and punishments, this is the one place where you're trusted, not for who you are, but for how you move, how you speak, how you listen. And that kind of trust, that's rare, even in a castle. You wake up with a paw in your mouth again. It belongs to a turnspit dog, short-legged, long-bodied, vaguely miserable, like a sausage with trauma. He's sprawled across your straw pallet, snoring softly, his fur matted with kitchen grease and what might be duck fat. You don't mind. He's warm, and honestly, he smells better than most of your coworkers. You're the turnspit dog keeper, which means you are the invisible, overworked, underfed bridge between noble cuisine and the medieval animal treadmill. Yes, that's a thing. The dogs run, the spit turns, the meat cooks, and someone has to make sure the dogs don't die, snap, or sit down mid-roast. That someone is you. Your shift begins before the fire's even lit. You get up, stretch your back until it clicks, and immediately step in something wet. Hopefully water, probably not. The dogs are restless. They know what's coming. You haul the first of them from the pallet, a stubborn mutt named Snipe. He bites you lightly. You deserve it. He's been on spit duty 3 days in a row. You rub his ears, mutter an apology, and lead him into the kitchen. The fires are already smoking. The cook is yelling about Swan again. You open the turnspit wheel. It looks like a hamster wheel. If hamsters weighed 30 pounds and had job-related trauma. Snipe crawls in. You latch the gate behind him. He starts walking. The spit begins to turn. The roast, boar, maybe, begins to spin. Now you watch, you time, you bribe, you beg. The trick is keeping them moving without pushing them too hard. If the dog slows down, the roast cooks unevenly. And the cook throws things, hot things, sharp things, emotional things. If the dog stops completely, the spit jerks, the meat slips, and you spend the rest of the morning being told that you've ruined Christmas. It's May. There are 4 dogs. You rotate them like wheels on a cart, 2 on duty, 2 resting. But none of them really rest. They just whine, twitch, and gnaw on old bones in the corner while you rub their legs and whisper encouragements like you're raising canine gladiators. You clean the wheels too, not because anyone tells you to, but because they squeak loud enough to make the cook's temples throb. You learned that lesson last month when a squeal mid-banquet earned you a ladle to the forehead. Sometimes the Lord himself walks through. He doesn't speak to you, just nods vaguely toward the meat and compliments the earthy flavor. That's your sweat and probably some dog hair. You're welcome. Feeding the dogs is another gamble. They're not supposed to eat scraps from the noble table, but you do it anyway. No one wants to run on an empty stomach, and dried peas aren't exactly performance fuel. So when no one's looking, you slip them bits of goose fat or crust soaked in gravy. They love you for it, until one of them bites your thumb off, which almost happened last week. Burns are common. Your forearms look like parchment. The kitchen is a furnace, even in winter. It's a wall of smoke, heat, and shouting. In summer, it becomes a punishment from God. The fire never goes out, not really. Even at night, it smolders, and you sleep nearby, just close enough to be useful, just far enough to be forgotten. You've inhaled so much ash that your snot comes out black. Your cough sounds like a dying bellows. Your eyes are permanently red, which at least hides the tears. You used to think dogs were cheerful, loyal, friendly. Now you know better. These are working dogs, bred not for companionship, but for endless mechanical endurance. They don't want affection, they want your bread. And if you're late feeding them, they organize a rebellion. You once walked into the wheel room to find 3 of them sitting in a circle, chewing your shoe. No one taught you how to train them. You just learned by trial, error, and blood loss. You keep a stick nearby, you don't like using it, you really don't, but sometimes they refuse to run. Sometimes they dig in their paws and stare at you with the eyes of an animal who knows it's part of a joke it can't understand. You've named them all: Snipe, Button, Moors, Guts. Guts is the mean one. He only likes you when you feed him bacon grease. Otherwise, he growls like a brewing storm and snaps at your ankles when he's off duty. You think he sees the world the same way you do, tired, greasy, and full of smoke. Once, a noble child wandered into the kitchen. She pointed at the dog wheel and said, "Look, a spinning puppy." You smiled. Then her tutor yanked her away and glared at you like you'd exposed her to something indecent. You didn't say a word. You never do. At some point, you realize your posture's changed. You walk hunched now, from years of ducking under low beams, crouching beside dog pens, and carrying iron spits still hot from the fire. Your hands are covered in calluses and burns. Your knees ache when it rains. You're 17. You used to dream of being a falconer. You thought maybe you'd train birds, walk through forests, wear a leather glove, and squint at the sky like you understood something. Now you can't even hear birds over the constant drumming of paws in a wheel. When you do get a moment alone, you sit by the back door, just out of sight. You let one of the dogs curl up next to you, usually Moors, the quiet one. She's the only creature in the kitchen that doesn't demand anything. She just breathes, warm and real, and you rest your head against her side for a minute, maybe 2. Then the bell rings again. More meat, more spinning. No one thanks the dog. No one thanks you. At night, you scrub the grease from your arms with sand and prayer. You curl up in straw, listening to the slow pant of sleeping dogs and the lingering sizzle of fat in the hearth. You dream of running, not from anything, just running, and the wheel keeps turning. Sometimes you hear the nobles talk about the charm of rustic kitchens. They mean the decor, the roasted swan, the smell of herbs they think came from the garden and not from the sweat of the scullery maid who harvested them barefoot in the dark. They don't know you exist. They don't know the dogs exist. If they do, they think it's quaint, a detail for the minstrels to include in their songs, the turning hounds of House Waxford, or something equally oblivious. You once overheard a bard say that turnspit dogs enjoy the exercise. You nearly choked on your own laugh. You've learned a strange patience working here. You don't argue, you don't complain, you just keep the wheel turning. You feed the dogs, tend the injuries, clean the wheel, and hope the day ends without blood. You've seen worse. One boy got his hand caught in the gearing last year. He doesn't work here anymore. You're not sure if he died or just became someone else's problem. You have a small cloth pouch hidden behind a beam. Inside is a bit of cheese you've been saving, a button shaped like a flower, and a dog's tooth. Guts lost it during a particularly bad day. You keep it like a relic, a reminder that even the meanest dog can break under pressure. Your ears ring from the shouting, from the heat, from the spin. Your bones hurt, your stomach is never quite full, but every once in a while, one of the dogs nuzzles your arm after a long run. And in that brief, strange moment, you feel seen, not by the castle, not by the cook, but by something living. And for now, that's enough. Because in this place, even the smallest kindness, a warm side, a steady breath, a dog that doesn't bite, is worth holding on to, especially when the fire never goes out and the wheel never stops. You fall asleep to the sound of paws on wood and wake to the same, as if the night itself is on a spit, slowly turning. You wake well before dawn, in darkness and cold. The castle walls don't hold warmth, not for the likes of you. The embers in the hearth are long dead, and your breath fogs in the air above your rough blanket. You sit up, every joint stiff from yesterday's labor. Your hands are already sore, though you haven't touched water yet. You are the laundress, and that means water, soap, fire, and pain. You dress quietly, pulling on a damp wool kirtle that smells faintly of smoke, tallow, and lye. The apron goes over it, stained and stiff with salt from old sweat and splashes of boiled linen water. You wrap a scarf around your hair, shove your feet into cracked leather shoes, and move like you're already late, because you are. The castle is mostly asleep as you pass through the cold stone halls, carrying a basket filled with the previous day's laundry. Shirts yellowed with sweat, underthings damp with fear, linen napkins stained with wine or worse. Some of these pieces belong to nobility, and any error, any shrinking, tearing, staining, will be treated as a personal offense. You've seen girls dismissed over a scorched tablecloth. You've nearly been whipped over a missing chemise. In the courtyard, you fill 2 wooden buckets at the well. The pump groans. The water splashes cold and loud in the morning silence. You carry the buckets, balanced on a yoke over your shoulders. It digs into your skin with every step, past the smokehouse, past the scullery, to the yard where the great copper-boiling pot waits, blackened over yesterday's ashes. You light the fire underneath with trembling hands and flint. By the time the water starts to steam, the air is sharp with smoke and your fingers are red with cold. You mix in a scoop of lye, made from hardwood ash you soaked and filtered last week. The liquid goes cloudy. You stir it with a long wooden paddle, careful not to let it splash. The burns on your arms are still healing from the last time you slipped with the lye water heating. You sort the laundry, coarse linens in one pile, fine ones in another. The lord's shirts and the ladies' undergarments are treated with reverence, not for what they are, but for what happens to you if they're returned imperfect. Woolens stay separate. You don't boil wool. You've seen a full cloak reduced to the size of a doll's coat in one careless afternoon. You begin with the soak. Linens go into the hot, lye-laced water and are stirred gently to loosen the stains and stench. Then comes the scrubbing, at a flat stone slab near the well. You kneel and press a servant's tunic down hard against the rock. You rub soap into the fabric, black soap made of tallow and lye, harsh on the cloth and worse on your hands. You scrub in strokes, knuckles whitening. The stone is rough, and the cloth is heavy, waterlogged, and stubborn. When you dunk it into a barrel to rinse, the water clouds instantly. You smile faintly progress. The rinse water is cold, so cold your fingers go numb within minutes. You work anyway, switching hands, clenching them to keep the blood moving. Every now and then, you blow on your fingers and flex your wrists, but it barely helps. You think of other women, the scullery maids, the wood carrier, and know they're cold too. It doesn't make you feel better. It just reminds you you're not alone. Once the worst of the dirt is out, you haul the linens to the stream that runs behind the outer wall. There, in the shallows, you beat the larger items, sheets, tablecloths, with a wooden paddle. You swing and smack and swing again, the water splashing up your sleeves. Every blow knocks out dirt. Every splash soaks your skin. You can barely feel your knees in the mud. Around you, a few washerwomen from the village do the same. No one speaks. No one needs to. The only sound is water, wood, and the occasional sigh. When the linens are beaten, rinsed, and twisted dry by hand, a process that leaves your shoulders screaming, you drape them over bushes or on long ropes strung between trees. In summer, they dry in the sun. In winter, you hang them near the hearth, praying they don't catch fire. Damp fabric and open flames make uneasy neighbors. You tend the fire again, check the boil, stir the next batch, fetch more water. You lose track of time in the repetition. Haul, soak, scrub, rinse, hang. By midday, you can't feel your forearms. By afternoon, your lower back is a knotted rope. There's a moment, though, when the lady's veil comes clean, a stubborn wine stain finally gone. You hold it up, steaming white against the smoke-dark sky, and feel a flicker of pride, brief. Then you spot a fray at the hem and mutter a curse. You'll have to patch it and pray no one notices. When all is hung and steaming gently in the afternoon wind, you sit for a moment on an upturned bucket, just to breathe. You tear a bit of crust from the pocket of your apron. Hard bread, mostly stale, but food all the same. You chew slowly and watch the linen dance in the wind. Then you're back at it, collecting the dry, folding the crisp, cold shirts, checking for mist stains or lingering damp. You sort the noble garments into a separate basket, laying a cloth between each folded item like layers of armor. You'll deliver these by hand, quietly, without making eye contact, without drawing attention. You are invisible. You must stay that way. At the kitchen door, you exchange a nod with a scullery maid who smells like fish and onions and exhaustion. Inside, the cook shouts something about missing cloths. You wordlessly pass her a folded bundle of kitchen rags. She grunts her thanks. You leave before she can remember your name. The last stop is the Lord Solar. You knock, a servant answers. You hand him the basket with a practice bow. He doesn't thank you. He closes the door. Your hands are raw, your neck aches, your back feels twisted, but nothing is stained, nothing is missing. That means today was good. You return to the laundry yard to put out the fire, empty the tubs, and rinse the soapstones. A sheet has blown loose and lies half in the mud. You grab it before anyone sees. It's only a little dirty. You'll wash it again tomorrow. You don't complain. There's no point. At last, just as the sun begins to set behind the battlements, you sit again, this time longer. You hold your hands out toward the fading warmth of the fire and feel the pain pulse back into them. Your nails are chipped, your fingertips are peeling, but they still work. In your apron pocket, you carry a scrap of linen, a torn piece from a ruined towel. You've been sewing it into a handkerchief in quiet moments. There's no time for that tonight, but just knowing it's there gives you something that belongs only to you. You eat in the servants' hall, pottage, bread, warm ale. You eat quickly, quietly, eyes low. Then you return to your pallet near the chimney. Your shift is over. Tomorrow will be the same, water, soap, fire, and pain. But tonight, you sleep. You've seen this before. If she rolls too much, she could twist something inside. You throw open the stall door and grab a halter. She thrashes, nearly catches your leg, but you hold on. You tug her up, walk her in tight circles. Her eyes roll white. You keep whispering, keep moving. A stable master shows up eventually, curses, and takes over. You step back, shaking. Your arms are covered in dirt and spittle. Your tunic is ripped, but she's standing now. That's something. You return to your rounds. 2 new guests have arrived. Their horses are skittish from the road. You soothe them as best you can, soft words, firm hands. One of them nips your sleeve. Another stomps and misses your toe by a hair. You fill troughs again, fetch more hay, sweep the aisle for the 3rd time. You mend the torn girth strap with twine and a bone needle. It's not pretty, but it will hold. The sun sinks behind the outer wall. The wind picks up. You close the stable doors, hang the lanterns, and check each horse one last time. You rub noses, check hooves, refill water buckets. You pat Smoke's neck, avoid Gorse's teeth, and scratch behind Willow's ears. When it's all done, you climb the ladder to the loft. You peel off your boots and flex your raw feet. You're covered in dust, hay, and sweat, but no one was kicked, nothing burned. No horses escaped. That makes it a good day. You eat a second meal in the loft. Some cheese you traded a favor for, and a hunk of onion bread too hard for the kitchen to keep. You chew slowly, legs tucked beneath you for warmth. Outside, the castle glows faintly with torchlight. Laughter floats from the great hall. Somewhere, a minstrel plucks a lute string. You hear it through cracks in the wood. It sounds like a dream someone else is having. You don't mind. The horses below shift in their stalls. One snorts, one whinnies softly. They're settling, same as you. You lie back in the straw, arms folded under your head. Your fingers ache, your knees crack when you stretch, your back feels like a plank, but you're not dead, and none of the animals under your care are either. That counts for something. You think about the stories they tell about knights, kings, tournaments. They all forget the boy who saddled the horse, who mucked the stall, who whispered to the animal that would carry a lord into glory or death. That's fine. You're not here to be remembered. You're here to work and to sleep when the work is done. The wind rattles the shutters below you. Hooves scuffle, and slowly, the weight of the day pulls you down into sleep. Your last thought is of a hoof print, perfectly stamped in the mud, rimmed with frost, still steaming from the warmth of the horse that left it. It won't last. It'll vanish by morning. But for now it's real, and so are you. You wake with a jolt, the butt of your spear still clutched in one hand. You must have nodded off again, but only for a moment, you're sure of it. The brazier beside you is nearly out, just a few orange coals crackling faintly in the darkness. You rub your eyes, shift your weight on the cold stone bench, and peer through the arrow slit beside you. Still night, still fog, still your watch. You're the castle guard, not a knight, not a soldier, not a man-at-arms with songs written about him. Just a guard. You stand, you wait, you freeze, and if something goes wrong, you're the first to die. It's your second night shift this week, and your knees already ache. You roll your shoulder, feel the bruise from yesterday's training drill. A wooden blade slammed into your side hard enough to rattle your ribs. The sergeant called it a learning moment. You called it something else, silently. Your job is simple. Watch the gate, watch the wall, walk the perimeter when the bell strikes the hour, report anything strange, and don't fall asleep. You listen for the bell now, distant, muffled. The wind whistles through the murder holes overhead, sharp and steady. You pull your cloak tighter. The wool is thin and doesn't help much, but it's all you're issued. Your breath fogs in the torchlight, curling into the stillness like smoke from a dying fire. You stretch your legs and walk a slow circle around the gatehouse interior. The stone floor is slick with old condensation and soot from the torches. You know every crack, every uneven flagstone. You've paced it too many times to count. At the outer parapet, the wind hits harder. Your cloak flaps against your legs. The courtyard below is quiet. A lone dog sniffs around the kitchen door. Somewhere, a drunk stumbles out of the barracks latrine, mumbling a tune and failing to close the door behind him. You don't call down. Not your problem, not tonight. You check the iron hinges on the main portcullis, still locked, still rusted, still your responsibility if it jams when it's needed most. You run your gloved hand down the edge. It's freezing to the touch. You think about the day shift, better in some ways, sunlight, warmth, people to talk to. But during the day, there's shouting, drills, inspections. At night, you're alone, forgotten. Except if someone breaks in, then suddenly everyone remembers the night guard. Back inside, you take your seat again. You tilt your head and rest it briefly against the cold stone wall. Your helmet's off, too heavy for hour 7 of nothing. You rest your hand on your spear like it's a staff or a crutch, maybe both. You hear something, a sound just beyond the gate, not a voice, not quite a footstep. You stand too fast, your knees complain. You move toward the door, grip your spear, hold your breath. It's nothing. A bird, maybe, or the gate settling in the frost. You wait a few moments longer, then exhale slowly and return to your post. False alarm. You're jumpy tonight. Can't afford not to be. You sit again, slowly. Your joints creak like a drawbridge. You pull a strip of dried meat from your pouch, cold, hard, a bit of gristle stuck to the edge. You chew slowly, jaw aching. This is dinner. Once, a noble boy sneered at your meal as he passed. He had a pastry in one hand and a silk handkerchief in the other. You didn't say anything. You just kept chewing. That's what guards do. Keep chewing, keep watching, keep standing, until they don't. You remember your first winter watch. Toes numb for days, fingers purple, skin cracked and bleeding. You learned the trick of wrapping wool inside your boots, layering grease cloth under your gloves. It helped a little. Midnight bells toll. You stand and make your round from the eastern tower to the west, past the armory, past the chapel. You pause there, light flickers in the chapel window. The priest must be praying again. He never sleeps either. You climb to the wall walk and scan the woods beyond the outer bailey. Black trees sway in a sea of mist. The moon casts a pale stripe across the fields. You see no movement. You see everything. You think of your mother's farm, of harvest moons and cider, and wonder if she's still there. You hope she is. You make it back to your post just as the brazier dies completely. You don't bother relighting it. The cold keeps you awake better anyway. Sometime after the last bell, the captain arrives. His boots echo on the stone as he enters. He doesn't speak at first, just looks you over, checks the ledger, taps the pike rack once with the butt of his halberd. Still breathing, he asks. Barely, you answer. He grunts, then passes by without further word. He never says, good work. You're not here for praise. You're here because someone has to be. You stretch once more, rotating your shoulder. The fog is lifting. The sky to the east is beginning to pale. Soon, the bells will ring for morning prayer, and your shift will end. The day guards will arrive, loud, well-rested, and freshly shaven. You'll nod, hand off your spear, and disappear back into silence. You descend the tower steps and make your way to the barracks. Your cot is rough. The blanket smells of mildew and smoke, but it's yours. You peel off your cloak, set your boots beside the bed, and sit a long moment before lying down. As your eyes begin to close, you hear the castle come alive. Shouting in the yard, buckets clanking, the cook's voice barking orders. You've earned your sleep, but you know you'll be back tonight. The castle doesn't guard itself. There was a time, last year, you still remember it, when bandits tried to storm the gate. Not many, just 6 or 7 desperate men, starving, drunk on stolen wine. They came after midnight, thinking the wall guards were asleep. You weren't. You sounded the bell. You shouted. You held the gate while others armed themselves. One of them, a tall one with an axe, almost made it to the portcullis. You caught him with a spear thrust through the ribs. He collapsed at your feet, died gurgling in the dirt. You didn't sleep for 3 nights after that, but no one thanked you. The steward sent down an extra crust of bread. The sergeant nodded once, said, you did your job. That was it. You did sleep eventually. And when the bruises faded and the frostbite healed, you were posted right back on the gate, because now they trusted you to stay awake. That was your reward. You shift your weight again, bones grinding. Your hip has a knot in it from years of leaning on stone. You ignore it. You've gotten used to ignoring things, hunger, cold, the sneers of nobles, the fear of being the first to die if anything truly bad happens. And yet, despite everything, there's pride, not the kind people toast in halls, but the kind that keeps your back straight when no one is watching. You keep the castle safe. That matters, even if no one sees it. You adjust your gear one last time before bed. The leather straps of your jerkin are cracked, the iron studs dulled from years of wear. Your helmet, dented at the rim, hangs beside your bunk. You should replace it. You won't. It still works. Around you, the other guards breathe deep in sleep. Some snore. One twitches as if fighting in his dreams. You envy them. They've done their part. Now they rest. You lie on your side and stare at the wall. The mortar lines look like roads on a map, winding and uncertain. You trace them with your eyes until they blur. Somewhere above, in the solar, nobles stretch in feather beds. Below them, you sleep with a knife under your pillow and your cloak wrapped around your feet. And still, if something were to go wrong in the dead of night, it would be you they send first, because that's what castle guards are for. You close your eyes, and for a few precious hours, you don't have to watch anything. You rise in silence. It's not that anyone is asleep near you. It's that they're all long gone. The scullery maid is curled up by the hearth. The stable boy is vanished into straw. The cook's snores echo faintly through the kitchens. But your work begins now. In the hollow hours, no one else wants. You are the night watchwoman. You're not a guard, exactly. You don't wear armor. You don't carry a sword. But you walk the halls with a lantern in one hand and a key ring in the other. And if something catches fire, if someone cries out, or if something moves that shouldn't, it's your problem. You wear soft shoes, patched and tied with scraps of cloth. You move without echo, that's the rule. Your dress is wool, thick and plain, with extra layers underneath, because the corridors at night are cold enough to crack teeth. Your lantern clicks once as you light it. The tallow candle flickers, casting long shadows across stone. You check the nursery first. 2 noble children sleeping fitfully beneath embroidered quilts. You don't know their names. You know when they have fevers, though you know which one wets the bed. You straighten the blanket and leave without a sound. Next, the hall of tapestries. Grand scenes of battles and blood and glory. You pass them slowly, your flame dancing in the glassy eyes of long-dead nights. Something creaks behind you. You don't turn around, just keep walking. You're not paid to be scared. You pass the library next. It's locked, but you check the door anyway. The last time it was left open, rats chewed through a manuscript, and the steward barked about it for a week. You jiggle the handle. Firm. You move on. The chapel is quiet. A votive candle still burns at the altar. You pause to snuff it, not out of irreverence, but caution. Last winter, a stray ember nearly caught the drapes. You touch the iron candlestick to make sure it's cold, then continue. You climb a narrow stairway, lantern held high. Your legs ache. This is your 3rd round tonight, and the castle isn't small. You walk with purpose, not hurried, not slow. Your ears stay sharp. You hear the creak of wood, the scuttle of mice, the faint drip of condensation off stone. You know every sound the castle makes, what's normal, what isn't. In the east wing, you find a window open. That's not right. It's latched from the inside during supper hours, and no one has reason to open it now. You set your lantern on the floor and close the window quietly. You don't report it. The steward doesn't believe in ghosts. You do. You check the laundry room next. Rows of steaming linens hung from rafters earlier are now stiff with cold. You tug one cloth down, a noble's cloak. Someone left it too close to the wall torch. The hem is singed. You sigh. You'll fix it yourself before anyone notices. You take the cloak with you, folded under your arm. You'll mend it in the still hour before dawn, when the fire is low and your fingers shake from exhaustion. The kitchen corridor is next. A pot left on the hearth still steams faintly. You lift the lid. Onion broth, thin and sour. You dip a crust of bread into it, careful not to take too much, just enough to feel like a person again. You don't eat with the others. You're not on their schedule. No one saves you a plate, but you've learned which shelves hide a wedge of cheese or a shriveled apple. The cook pretends not to know. Maybe she pities you. Maybe she once walked these same halls. You check the stair to the Lord Solar. You do not go up. You're not permitted. That's where the other world lives. The world with featherbeds and warm slippers and voices that ring with command. You just watch it from below. You head toward the servants' dormitory. A baby cries behind one door. You knock gently. A mother opens, blurry-eyed. You pass her a flask of warm water. She nods thanks without speaking. You leave her to it. Sometimes when the castle sleeps, the walls feel alive, not haunted, exactly, but heavy with all the lives passing through them. The floor beneath your feet was scrubbed by 1,000 women before you. The stone arch above you was carved by someone who's been dust for centuries. You don't feel small, you feel connected. That's what keeps you moving. You take your final round just before dawn. The lantern is low now. You tilt it to coax out more light from the stub of candle, but there's not much left. The flame flutters, casting dancing shadows along the hallway walls. You pass through the lower storerooms, eyes peeled for anything out of place. This is where the rats come, where a spark could start a fire that would eat the whole castle. You pause by the armory door. It's cracked. That's wrong. You step inside, heart quickening. You don't have a weapon, just your keys, just your voice. You scan the racks, swords, pikes, axes, all accounted for. You check the back wall, nothing, no one. A draft must have nudged the door, or someone left it unlatched. Still, you shut it firmly and slide the bolt home. Back at your seat near the kitchen hearth, you finally let yourself rest. You set the lantern beside you, unwrap the cloak you carried, and pull out needle and thread. The mending takes time. Your stitches are slow, but even. You've done this before. You finish just as the bells toll for morning prayer. The castle stirs, a door creaks, someone groans, another day begins. You fold the cloak, return it to its peg, and climb to your cot above the linen stores, barely more than a shelf. You tuck your legs beneath your skirt, curl into yourself like a letter unopened, and close your eyes. The castle breathes around you. You sleep. There are moments in the middle of a night when you forget the hour entirely. The castle exists out of time, its own little world of shadow and draft and silence. The walls breathe, the rafters creak. You've learned to tell which sound means loose timber and which means wind. You carry a small pouch of salt in your apron, not for seasoning, for protection. The old cook told you once that evil things dislike salt, that if you ever saw something that didn't belong in the halls, you should throw it at its feet. You've never had to, but the pouch stays. In the east corridor, near the old chapel, there's a patch of stone colder than the rest, no matter the season. You step over it every time, just a habit. No one talks about it. Sometimes a nobleman's mistress will be out late, slipping from one chamber to another. You pretend not to see, you keep your eyes down. Your keys stay quiet. Secrets are not yours to keep, but they are yours to carry. You once caught the steward himself stealing candles, taking them from chapel stores to light his own hearth in winter. He locked eyes with you, said nothing. Neither did you. But a week later, you found a thick blanket folded on your cot, no explanation. You never mentioned it. These are the quiet trades of castle life, the unspoken debts and wordless bargains made not in coin, but in silence and stitches, and you are fluent in them. In the quietest part of the night, just before the birds begin to stir, you sometimes pause beneath the great window, overlooking the courtyard. You let the lantern hang low, just for a moment, and you look up. The stars shimmer, hard and cold and far beyond reach, but they're always there, no matter what happened that day, no matter what burns or breaks. The stars return. You think of your mother's stories. She used to say the night had ears, that it listened to the women who worked while others slept. And maybe it does. You've whispered your share of wishes into its stillness, most of them practical, none of them answered. Still, the watching comforts you. You take a slow breath, stretch your aching arms, and begin walking again. The same halls, the same locks, the same long shadows. Because someone has to, because someone always has, and tonight, as always, that someone is you. Hey there. Tonight, we're not stepping into a history book. We're stepping into it by accident. You've time-traveled to medieval England. No warning, no guidebook, just the cold, the mud, and the strange stares of people who know you don't belong. This isn't the world of knights and legends. This is the world of chamber pots, spoiled bread, and social rules that could get you flogged if you bow wrong. You'll fumble through languages, lose your bag, and pretend to know saints you've never heard of, all just to survive another day. If quiet, immersive history helps you unwind, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it brings you some peace. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always oddly comforting to see how far these stories travel. So dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan, and settle in. Let's begin with you waking up in the wrong century. You wake up to silence. Not the digital kind, not the hum of appliances or the faint buzz of a city outside your window, but real, pressing, unnerving silence. The kind of silence that belongs to a place without electricity, without traffic, without time. A heavy, unyielding quiet, broken only by the distant rustle of leaves and the hollow hoot of a nightboard. Your hands are cold. The air is damp. You're lying in dirt. You sit up slowly, heart hammering, with a strange mix of confusion and dread. It's dark. Not night in the city dark, but pitch. Total absence of light. Your eyes strain. Eventually, shapes begin to form. Trees, moss, maybe a distant flicker of firelight between crooked branches. You reach for your phone. No service, no signal. Just a lock screen that suddenly feels like the last connection to your own world. You try to breathe. Then you notice the smell. Earthy, smoky, not exactly unpleasant, just unfamiliar. The air carries with smoke, wet leaves, manure, and something musky you can't quite place. It's the smell of a world that hasn't been sanitized. Congratulations. You're not in Kansas anymore. You're in the English countryside. And judging by the absence of stone roads, fences, or chimneys, you're several hundred years too early. You're in medieval England, probably the 14th century. You don't know how you got here. The time machine joke is long past funny. Now, you need a plan. First rule, don't panic. Second rule, don't let anyone see you arrive. In the medieval world, people weren't necessarily terrified of strangers, but they were very interested in them. And if your clothing, speech, or behavior marks you as too foreign, too different, you won't get burned as a witch, probably, but you will be talked about, questioned, and possibly robbed, or worse, forced into some story you can't control. So you move quietly. The forest around you is thick, but not untouched. These aren't wild woods. They've been cut, scavenged, managed. Medieval England's forests weren't untouched nature preserves. They were heavily used for firewood, for hunting by nobles, for gathering mushrooms and berries by peasants, if allowed. But most forest land was owned. Every twig had a price. If you're caught breaking branches or dragging wood, and you can't prove you're a tenant of a local lord, it could be considered theft. And in this era, theft could get your hand chopped off. You walk toward the glow of a town, still hidden among the trees. The lights are few, a smattering of torches or maybe hearth fires showing through crude wooden shutters. There are no street lamps, no windows of glass, just wooden planks with slits or animal hide stretched thin. Light leaks, flickers, then vanishes. As you get closer, you find the road. It's not paved, not even cobbled, just packed mud scored by cart ruts and pocked with puddles. Medieval roads weren't designed for comfort. They were functional scars across the land, often flooded, slippery, and worse, after a freeze. You try to keep your footing, but already your shoes, sleek, modern, unmistakable, are coated in grime. You take them off, hide them. Your socks go too. Clothing matters. You're wearing materials they've never seen. Synthetic fibers, zippers, stitching machines hadn't been invented. If you walk into town in jeans and a sweatshirt, you're an alien, no matter how friendly you try to be. Best case scenario, they think you're from a faraway land. Worst case, they think you're an escaped lunatic. So you do what any prudent time traveler would. Bury your clothes in the woods. Tuck your phone deep into your bag. Tie your hoodie around a tree. Strip down to a thermal undershirt. It almost passes for a linen tunic. You pull your hair into something vaguely rustic. You rub a little dirt on your face and practice looking underfed. There's a town gate ahead. You approach it just before dawn. Towns in this period often had gates not to keep people in, but to keep animals and thieves out. Many had curfews, often marked by the ringing of a bell at sundown. After dark, entry was restricted unless you had a very good reason. But now, as first light creeps in, soft blue and pink across the frost-touched earth, the town begins to stir. You enter with a small group of people, traders, peasants, maybe pilgrims. No one notices you. The street is narrow, muddy. Houses lean at odd angles, their timber-framed wattle and daub, meaning wooden slats packed with mud and straw. The roofs are thatched. The air smells like firewood and animal waste. Chickens dart across the path. You almost step on one. People here sleep differently. Most take a first sleep, wake in the middle of the night for a couple of hours to stoke the fire, say prayers, or talk quietly, and then return to a second sleep. The idea of a single 8-hour sleep wasn't common. That's modern and rare. You pass what must be a blacksmith's forge, soot-blackened walls, the smell of iron and sweat, a stable, a cook shop selling yesterday's bread, and something bubbling in a pot that smells like onions and despair. No one greets you. That's good. But they will ask eventually, who are you? In the Middle Ages, everyone belonged to someone, to a household, a guild, a parish, a trade. There's no such thing as a just passing through traveler. If you don't belong to a network, you're not protected. And if you're not protected, you're vulnerable to crime, arrest, or simple suspicion. So you rehearse your answer. You're a pilgrim. That's the safest option. Pilgrims were common, and they could be from anywhere. A story about being on the road to Canterbury or Santiago de Compostela will satisfy most people. You invent a village 400 miles away, hoping no one here has relatives there. You bow politely when someone makes eye contact. Don't shake hands. That wasn't common yet. You speak as little as possible. Your accent is strange. Your grammar worse. You mumble. You smile faintly. And then someone offers you bread. It's dry, dense, mostly rye, probably bulked with barley and bean flour, but it's warm. You chew it slowly, nodding thanks, hoping the act of eating makes you look less like someone who fell from the sky last night. And just like that, you've survived your first hour. But the day hasn't even begun. You've been awake for less than an hour, and already you're someone else. That's how things work here. No passports, no IDs, no background checks, just stories. And in medieval England, your story is your protection. You need one fast. You choose the safest lie you can think of. You're a pilgrim. You tell your first version of it to a stable boy. He asks where you're headed. You pause. Canterbury, you say, not because you're religious, but because it's the only medieval pilgrimage destination you can name under pressure. It works. He nods solemnly and goes back to mucking out straw. That's your new truth now. You're a pilgrim on your way to visit the shrine of St. Thomas Becket, the archbishop famously murdered in Canterbury Cathedral in 1170. His martyrdom turned the city into one of Europe's most visited holy sites. Pilgrims came from all over, rich and poor, sick and healthy, devout and desperate, hoping for miracles, forgiveness, or just a few days of rest under God's gaze. It's a good cover. Pilgrims were everywhere in the Middle Ages, moving between towns, staying at inns and monasteries, traveling in groups when they could, alone when they had to. Some wore the scallop shell of Santiago. Others carried wooden staffs or painted tokens from previous shrines. Most were poor. Many were ill. A few were fugitives. All were tired. And now you are one of them. The lie isn't just for strangers. It's for yourself too. You repeat it internally, smoothing the edges. You come from a distant village. You're traveling alone because your cousin fell ill. You're visiting Canterbury because your brother had a dream. You're doing penance for a sin you won't name. You've practiced just enough church Latin to make your mumbled prayers sound authentic. Your story buys you shelter. A gray-robed monk at a small priory hears your tale and waves you inside. He doesn't ask many questions. He doesn't seem surprised by your strange accent or your patchy knowledge of Scripture. Pilgrims were expected to be odd. You say you've been walking for weeks. He believes you. Everyone looks weathered here. He shows you to a room. Not really a room, more like a corner of a drafty hall with 3 other pilgrims sleeping side by side. One of them snores like an injured bear. Another mutters in his sleep. You pull your borrowed wool cloak tighter around your shoulders and try not to think about the bed bugs. Hospices and monasteries were some of the few places in medieval Europe where travelers could sleep without paying coin. The church was legally and spiritually obligated to provide charity to pilgrims. That obligation was sometimes ignored, of course, especially if the monk in question was having a bad day or the priories were stretched thin. But most would still offer at least some stale bread, a spoonful of pottage, and a patch of floor near a fire. You eat what you're given, barley pottage, boiled gray, and salted with tears. You chew slowly, try not to think of seasoning. Spices exist in this time, but not for you. A pinch of pepper costs more than your borrowed cloak. Your spoon is shared, wiped on cloth that has seen better centuries. Your bowl is wood, splintered, and probably older than the Magna Carta. Around you, the other pilgrims talk. One limps from a foot wound. Another coughs, so violently you're surprised he's still upright. They tell their stories, a woman hoping for her son's healing, a man seeking redemption for adultery, a third who just wanted to see the world while his debts cooled down back home. None of them ask why you're here. They understand. In the Middle Ages, pilgrimage was part religion, part social mobility, and part escape. It was a way to disappear without actually vanishing. You try to sleep, but your thoughts churn. In your world, identity is static. Name, photo ID, biometrics. Here, it's malleable. You could be anyone, so long as you can walk in a straight line and keep your story straight. No one here has heard of Google. No one's going to fact-check your claim that your uncle once met a monk in Mont Saint-Michel. They'll just nod. People believe strangers because they have to. The entire medieval world runs on trust and fear. The next morning, you rise early, not by choice. There's no privacy, no doors, and the bell tolls for matins well before dawn. The monastery is cold. Your breath fogs in the dark. You don't know the prayers, but you stand with the others, murmuring nonsense syllables under your breath. No one notices. Half of them are doing the same. Afterward, you're handed a heel of bread and told to move along. Pilgrims don't linger. Outside, the town is stirring. Vendors are rolling open stalls, mostly selling vegetables, old tools, or gray-looking meat. You walk past a butcher shop and try not to stare too long at the headless pig carcass hanging from an iron hook. Flies already dance around it. Meat went bad quickly here. Salt was expensive. Freshness was a fantasy. You remember something from a history video. Most medieval towns had a market day, usually once a week. That's when rural folk from nearby villages brought their goods in to sell: eggs, cheese, root vegetables. You'd have to barter or haggle. There's no such thing as fixed prices. Everything is a negotiation. And if you don't know the local currency, silver pennies, halfpennies, farthings, you'll get fleeced. You want to buy something, but realize you have nothing to trade, not even a coin. You still have your wristwatch tucked into a wool sleeve. You glance at it, but it means nothing here. No one cares what time it is. People in this world measure time by bells, prayers, and the position of the sun. If it's light out, you work. If it's dark, you pray, hide, or sleep. You decide to ask for help instead. You spot a woman selling oatcakes and approach slowly, trying to look humble but not pitiful. You speak softly, explaining you're on the road, low on supplies, and blessed to meet such a generous face. It's not Shakespeare, but she gives you one cake anyway. Maybe she believes you. Maybe she just likes feeding people. Maybe she wants your blessing. Pilgrims were holy, or at least adjacent to holiness. Many townsfolk believed that aiding a pilgrim earned favor with God. You say a quick Deus te benedicat in your best fake Latin accent. It means God bless you. She nods, pleased. You chew slowly as you wander the streets. The oatcake is dense, unsweetened, and laced with something bitter, wormwood, maybe, or just bad grain. Still, it's food. You count your blessings. 1 oatcake, 2 working legs, no fever yet. You pass a group of children playing in the dirt. One of them is holding a carved wooden hoop, rolling it along the ground with a stick. Another clutches a crude doll made of rags. They stop and stare at you, not in fear, just curiosity. One points to your wrist. You cover it instinctively. That's when it hits you. You're not out of the woods. You've got your story, your cloak, your pilgrim status, but you don't have years of dirt under your fingernails. You don't carry yourself like someone who's been beaten down by a lifetime of scarcity. You walk too straight. You flinch at smells. You make eye contact too much. It's subtle, but it's there. To them, you still don't quite belong. So you drop your gaze. You shuffle a little more. You mimic the limp of the man you saw last night. You avoid direct questions. You learn to listen before you speak. This world doesn't care how smart you are. It cares whether you follow the rhythm, blend in, or vanish. That night, you find another place to sleep, a barn offered by a generous farmer in exchange for chopping wood. You say yes before he finishes the sentence. Your hands blister after a few minutes. He doesn't notice or doesn't care. Labor is labor. Pain is normal. As you lie in the hay, curled into a ball against the cold, you rehearse your story again. You're a pilgrim from the north, on the road to Canterbury, traveling for penance, alone, always alone. And as the stars turn overhead, bright and indifferent, you realize this truth. Lying is easy in the Middle Ages. Living is not. You wake to birdsong and a stiff neck. The straw you slept on has shifted, and now a twig has embedded itself somewhere beneath your shoulder blade. You roll over slowly, swatting at gnats, and blink your eyes open to a patch of gray sky and the low, heavy branches of oak. There's no roof here, just tree limbs and fog. This is your camp now. No walls, no hearth, just a hollow in the earth behind a mossy boulder, hidden off the forest path. The best place for someone like you to disappear for a while. You are lucky to be offered work. Not everyone is. The farmer's sister, or perhaps his wife, you couldn't tell, told you there was a need for extra hands gathering firewood and herbs from the forest. You agreed before asking what it entailed. You needed the food. You still do. So now, for today, you are a forager. And like everything else in the Middle Ages, this job comes with rules. First rule: the forest does not belong to you. That might be hard to accept, especially if you come from a world where trees are public, land is protected, and anyone with a pair of hiking boots can wander freely. But here, in the 1300s, the forest is not wilderness. It is property. Every stretch of woodland in England is either held by a noble, claimed by the crown, or attached to an estate. You do not own the acorns. You do not own the rabbits. You do not own the fallen twigs. Collecting firewood might seem harmless, but if you're caught with the wrong bundle of sticks in the wrong part of the woods, you could be beaten, fined, or even branded. This is the age of the forest laws, introduced after the Norman conquest and expanded under monarchs like Henry II. These laws protected hunting grounds for the elite. Royal forests were especially off-limits, even to peasants who lived nearby. You could be hanged for killing a deer, mutilated for setting traps, or flogged for chopping down trees. So, second rule, don't get caught. You keep to the edges, avoiding cleared paths. You carry a dull knife and a sack that once held barley. You pick up only what's already fallen: twigs, small branches, dry bramble. No cutting, no chopping, just gathering. The forest is quiet, save for the rustle of squirrels and the distant call of a wood pigeon. You see no other humans. Good. That's what you want. The best foragers are the ones no one notices. But silence doesn't mean safety. The forest is still dangerous. Wolves are gone, mostly hunted out of southern England by this century. Bears have been extinct here for hundreds of years. But there are still dangers: wild boars, hornets, and most of all, men. You hear a crunch behind you. You freeze. Just a deer, probably. Still, your heart hammers. Bandits are real here. The woods are a natural hideout for the desperate. Escaped serfs, outlaws, deserters from local militias. They live rough, ambush travelers, and disappear into the trees. The king's law doesn't stretch far into these parts. If someone robs you out here, you won't get justice. You won't get anything. So you keep your head down and work faster. You don't just gather firewood. You're also collecting wild herbs. The farmer's wife, she's definitely his wife, you've decided, gave you a list, scrawled with marks you can't read. But she named them aloud: yarrow, mugwort, chickweed, comfrey, plantain. You recognize some. You pretend to recognize the rest. These plants are not just for flavoring food, though food could certainly use the help. They're medicine, insect repellent, even magic in the eyes of some. You pick them carefully and place them in separate cloth pouches. You whisper their names under your breath, part prayer, part memory. A patch of nettles stings your hands. You wince, but say nothing. No gloves. You'll just deal with it. You take a break, crouch near a tree stump. Your lunch is a crust of rye bread, hard as stone, and a pinch of salt from the bottom of your pocket. You eat it slowly, like it matters. There's water nearby, a stream, shallow and slick with green algae. You scoop some into your hands and drink. The taste is earthy. You'll probably regret this later. Maybe soon. But the beer you were given is long gone, and you need something to wash down the bread. You spot a small bundle of mushrooms under an elm. White caps, fragile stems. You pause. Mushrooms are dangerous here. One wrong guess, and you'll die vomiting in a ditch. your skin gray and your mouth foaming. Medieval people knew this. Folk wisdom passed from mothers to daughters, warned of the poisonous kinds, death caps, destroying angels, fool's mushrooms. But they also prized the safe ones, puffballs, morels, field mushrooms. You decide not to risk it. You leave them. You spend the afternoon weaving through thicket, your legs scraped and your knees soaked with bog water. A bramble tears your sleeve. You make a note to mend it later, if you can find a needle. Your cloak is already threadbare, and your tunic smells like every bad thing you've touched in the last day. As you walk, your mind drifts. You think about what it would be like to live this way every day. Some people do. The poorest villagers, widows, orphans, landless peasants, often supplement their diets by foraging. Some even make it their primary trade, gathering herbs and firewood to sell at the market. These forest workers are not respected. They're seen as borderline vagrants, useful when someone needs birch bark or sage, ignored otherwise. But their knowledge is immense. They know which tree bleeds the cleanest sap, which root breaks fevers, which patch of moss makes the best poultice. Their wisdom is passed quietly, never written down. You wonder how many secrets have already been lost. By late afternoon, your sack is full. Your shoulders ache. Your fingers are bleeding from thorns. You begin the walk back, retracing your steps to avoid any unfamiliar paths. Getting lost in a medieval forest is not poetic. It's deadly. No GPS, no signage. If the sun sets before you find a road, you may not make it out. You emerge from the woods just as the sky begins to dim. The farmer is waiting near the fields. He eyes your haul and grunts approval. His wife takes the herbs without a word and drops a turnip into your palm. That's your pay. You want to complain. You want to say you worked all day for a root vegetable, but you don't. Because in this world, complaining is dangerous. Gratitude is safer. You nod and say thank you. She doesn't smile, but she doesn't hit you either. You eat the turnip raw, sitting by the dying embers of the farm's cookfire. It's bitter, but it fills the space in your stomach, just barely. That night, you sleep in the barn again. The cows are snoring. A chicken perches dangerously close to your head. You lie on a pile of old straw and stare at the rafters. You think about the forest, its silence, its rules, its quiet judgment. You were only there for a day. Some people never leave. You really thought you were ready. You downloaded PDFs, watched hour-long YouTube linguistics breakdowns, even practiced aloud in your car like a lunatic. God be with you, you had muttered proudly to yourself in the mirror. Ek coming from Fairfax. You had this. You were going to blend in with the locals, fool them all. But now that you're here, really here, standing in the cobbled market square of a medieval English town, surrounded by smells you can't describe and people who all seem to be speaking while chewing gravel, you realize you have absolutely no idea what anyone is saying. It's not just the accent. It's not just the slang. It's that they're not even speaking the language you studied. You'd chosen Old English, figured it was the safe bet, Anglo-Saxon roots. You remembered Beowulf. But Beowulf was written 400 years ago from where you're standing. The people here are speaking a form of Middle English, but not the kind Chaucer wrote down. This is something else, something brutal, something nasal and fast, splattered with French loanwords and riddled with regional weirdness. You try to follow a conversation between two traders and can't tell if they're haggling over fish or accusing each other of witchcraft. One man shouts across the square, "Hoy, that be on reeve. What's told me off, why soaking it, he?" You blink. Sorry. He squints. Be daft or Flemish? You mumble something about having a sore throat and shuffle away. You make a mental note. Don't talk unless absolutely necessary. Back home, you thought language would be the least of your problems. You'd assume disease, violence, or dysentery would kill you first. But now, it's becoming clear your mouth is the real liability. The second you open it, you're a walking contradiction. Someone who looks like a local, maybe smells like one by now, but talks like they were raised by a committee of monks and time travelers. The word choices are wrong. The cadence is wrong. And God help you if someone tries to make a joke. You're learning that humor is terrifying when you don't understand the punchline. You laugh nervously when a baker says something to you about a hedge-priest sausage, and then realize from his expression that he wasn't joking. Or maybe he was. Or maybe it was an insult. You start miming more, a lot more. Hungry? Rub your belly. Tired? Point at the sun and yawn. Need directions? Just walk with purpose and hope someone follows you. This isn't communication. It's charades for survival. Later that day, in the shadow of the parish church, you overhear two children arguing over a sheep. The older one yells, "Nay, I fain saw it go by the breck." The smaller one jabs back, "Nay, it was thine eyes gone adult, fool." You could not feel more foreign if you tried. You start cataloging phrases in your head, trying to reverse engineer meaning. Fain means glad or wanted. Breck must be some kind of hill or field. Maybe. You don't even know what century you're linguistically in anymore. Then there are the loanwords. After the Norman conquest, French bled into the English tongue like wine into linen. Nobles speak in a clipped, smoother dialect laced with Latin and French, while the peasants bark with thick consonants and nasal vowels. You start to realize that class is audible here. You can hear who owns land and who sleeps in a ditch just from how they pronounce the word bread. You try saying pardon to a noble, and he nods. You try the same word to a stable hand, and he spits. At one point, desperate to communicate, you try to recall some Latin. Big mistake. A friar overhears you reciting an old phrase from a textbook and asks where you trained. You panic and say, "Rome." He frowns and starts asking questions about church councils you've never heard of. You fake a cough and limp away. You now have a new rule. No Latin unless it's in a prayer, and you're not the first to say it. Later, you find yourself in a cook shop trying to purchase what you think is a pasty. You point. The cook stares at you. 2 farthings, she says. You hold out a handful of pennies. She picks out 4 of them, then slaps your wrist and takes a 5th. You blink. "No more, and yesterone's bread for you," she mutters, handing you something that smells like a barn floor. You nod. "Cheers," you say instinctively. Everyone in the room freezes. You realize too late that cheers is not a medieval word. They stare at you like you just said something obscene. One man chuckles, another narrows his eyes. You mutter, "God give you good tomorrow," and bolt out the door. There's another surprise. Reading doesn't help. You had assumed signs would be easier, but almost nothing is written, and when it is, it's inconsistent, phonetic, and barely legible. There's no standard spelling. A house might be spelled Elahis one day and Alofs the next. The only people who can write well are clerics, and they write in Latin anyway. Even street names, when posted, are sometimes just pictures. One tanner has a crude painting of a cow and a knife above his stall. Another stall, no joke, just has a turnip nailed to a board. You feel like you're illiterate, which, to be fair, would make you just like most people here. The worst part isn't the confusion. It's the danger of miscommunication. Say the wrong thing, and people assume you're mad, or foreign, or cursed. One evening, a drunk stumbles into you. You instinctively say, "Sorry, my fault." He squints. "My fault? What, you confess into witchery, are you?" You quickly change it to, "Forgive me, I was clumsy." That seems to work, barely. You realize, in this world, words can get you hurt. There's no Yelp, no customer service, no ironic oops to shrug off a mistake. The people here live close to violence, suspicion, and insult. And you are always one bad sentence away from being called a heretic, a spy, or just not right in the head. Over time, you adapt. You learn to use simple, short phrases. You copy what others say, even if you don't fully understand. You start saying "I" instead of "yes," "nay" instead of "no." You use gestures whenever possible. You never ask questions unless someone else asks one first. You listen more than you speak. And it helps a little. By the end of your 4th day, you can order food without being scammed. You know how to respond to greetings. You've even made a boy laugh by using the word "s" at the right time. You're still a foreigner, but maybe a harmless one. You lie in the monastery loft that night, staring at the rafters, the straw mattress prickling your back, and realize you've survived not because of knowledge, but because of mimicry, Because you learned to copy faster than you could explain. The truth is, language here isn't a tool. It's a test. And every conversation is a pop quiz in a dialect you don't speak, with a punishment for failure. You think of your phone, the Translate app, the internet. You think of how many times you've Googled a word, a phrase, an idiom. That luxury is gone. All you have now is your ears and your memory. And if you say the wrong thing tomorrow, the truly wrong thing, you might not get to say anything ever again. It starts with a cramp, not a dramatic one, just a small, nagging pinch in your gut, like you skipped lunch or ate something that didn't sit right. You think nothing of it. You've had worse after airport sushi. But soon, you're curled up behind a pigsty, clutching your stomach and praying to a God whose prayers apparently smell like manure. This is not a metaphorical bad day. This is medieval gastrointestinal reality kicking in. You tried to be careful. You really did. You boiled the water. You stuck to what looked like bread. You avoided anything with color. But the problem isn't the food. It's everything. Your body, raised on pasteurized milk, municipal tap water, and sterile grocery aisles, has no idea how to cope with medieval Europe's microbial jungle. You are, as they would say, soft. Your first suspect is the pottage. Pottage is what they serve when they don't want to serve food. It's a murky, oatmeal-like sludge of grains and whatever else didn't rot in the last few days, cabbage, maybe a turnip, possibly a frog, depending on the cook's attitude toward protein and plausibility. The same pot is used day after day, refilled endlessly with more of the same. A medieval version of a never-ending stew, flavored with time, despair, and whatever fell in when no one was looking. You knew all that. You ate it anyway. And now your stomach feels like it's hosting a reenactment of the Norman invasion. By nightfall, you're alternating between cold sweat and chills, wrapped in your itchy wool cloak like a sad medieval burrito. Your face is pale. Your lips are dry. You try to sip beer, weak, watery ale, the safest thing to drink here. But even that turns against you. This isn't just food poisoning. This is your immune system panicking like a chihuahua in a thunderstorm. Now, some background. Germ theory does not exist yet. No one knows what bacteria are. They don't even know what causes disease. Not really. Illness is believed to come from bad air, miasmas, or imbalances in your humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Depending on which one's out of whack, your treatment might be leeches, vomiting, purging, or prayer. Most people never learn what made them sick. They just get sick, and either they recover or they disappear. So when you wake up the next morning, still alive, groggy but breathing, you've already done better than a decent percentage of your contemporaries. A nun finds you that morning, collapsed near the back wall of a Dominican friary, looking like a broken scarecrow. You try to stand, but the world tilts sideways, and your legs fold like bread dough. She doesn't flinch, just lifts your chin, squints at your eyes, and tucks something bitter and leathery into your mouth. It's disgusting, like someone soaked tree bark in vinegar and sadness. You try to spit it out, but she shushes you with the force of someone who has done this 1,000 times. You chew, you swallow, you don't vomit. A victory. She doesn't ask who you are. She doesn't report you. She just presses a coarse cloth to your forehead and mutters a prayer you can barely follow. It's Latin, and you catch only a few familiar phrases, something about mercy, something about healing, something about how humans are like dust. You nod weakly. That last part sounds about right. This, you'll learn, is one of the rare benefits of the medieval world. While medicine is horrific, charity is baked into the culture, especially through the church. Religious orders run rudimentary infirmaries. Monasteries often have a hospitaller, a monk or nun responsible for tending the sick, even outsiders. Hospitality is sacred. If you're lucky, and you were, they will treat you, even if you can't pay. And here's another historical wrinkle. You're not alone. Half the town is sick with something, coughs, skin infections, fevers. It's a walking petri dish. Sanitation is theoretical. Hygiene is seasonal. Medicine is improvised. And yet, somehow, people survive. Over the next 2 days, you barely move. The friary lets you lie on a straw mat near the wall, not quite in the infirmary, but close enough to be monitored. A girl brings you thin broth in a chipped wooden bowl. You manage a few sips. You are so exhausted, it feels structural, like even your bones are tired. Every joint aches. Your spine feels like it's been rolled down a hill. Your breath smells like you've been chewing onions in a tomb, and you're pretty sure no one changed your shirt while you were unconscious. You'll thank her later. When you finally manage to sit upright without tipping over, you hear it, the bell tower striking, marking time. Time is marked here not by watches or apps, but by bells, 7 canonical hours, each a holy checkpoint. You learn them by accident. You become a creature of bells, of hunger, of gut sounds, and the occasional vision of St. Peter riding a flaming goat. Okay, that part might have been the fever. By the 3rd day, you've graduated to walking slowly. You help sweep the courtyard to show your gratitude. Your legs wobble like they've forgotten what being vertical means, but you don't collapse. The friar overseeing you nods in approval. He offers you another lump of that foul root stuff, maybe wormwood, maybe licorice, maybe just dirt, and you chew it dutifully. He claps you on the shoulder. You take it as a blessing or a warning. You've been sick, really sick, but you didn't die. And that makes you a statistical outlier. Historically speaking, many people didn't get better. Illness in the Middle Ages could mean anything from a passing bug to your last few days on Earth. Infant mortality rates were horrific. The average life expectancy hovered around 35, but that's skewed heavily by child deaths. If you made it past 10, you had a decent shot at surviving to 50. But illness was never a surprise. It was a companion, part of life. You expected it, endured it. And when it came for your neighbor, your child, or your spouse, you grieved briefly and carried on, because there was always more to do, always another fire to stoke, another field to plow, another mouth to feed. You learned something else in your recovery. People don't talk about sickness the way you're used to. No long venting sessions, no long-winded symptom breakdowns. No, how are you holding up texts? They shrug. It's the season, they say. Or, it's God's will. Or just, it happens. And, in a way, it makes sense. When illness is everywhere and medicine barely functions, talking about it doesn't help. So they don't. It's humbling and a little terrifying. Because if you fall sick again, and you probably will, you might not be lucky next time. You might not find the nun. You might not be near a friary. You might just collapse in a gutter and not wake up. The next day, you feel strong enough to leave. The friar gives you a pat on the back. The girl with the broth smiles shyly. You try to say thank you in the local dialect, but it probably comes out closer to, I kneel in the direction of your turnip. They don't correct you. You walk out of the friary and into the morning light, a little bent, a lot grateful, and lighter. Everything smells stronger, bread, smoke, dung, sweat. The world feels sharp, real, present. You survived. And in the Middle Ages, that's enough to count as a good day. You wake up with a new appreciation for life, also with no bag. It takes you a few seconds to register what's missing. You pat the ground around you, check under your straw mat, then under the mat of the man beside you, who is snoring with the delicate subtlety of a charging ox. Your satchel, the one that held your last pair of socks, 2 small coins, a now precious bar of emergency chocolate, and your hidden compass, is gone, vanished, along with any lingering belief that you are beginning to blend in. You sit up and look around. It's morning in the back alley of a town that doesn't know your name and wouldn't care if you dropped dead in it. Somewhere, a bell tolls the hour. Nearby, a vendor shouts about cabbage in a voice that could tenderize meat. Life goes on, just not your life. Not as planned. Let's be clear, you've just been robbed and nobody cares. There's no police station, no mounted guards patrolling with notepads and radios, number 911 dispatcher asking, what's your emergency? The only law enforcement around is the bailiff, and his main job is making sure your taxes get paid, not returning your missing socks. You try mentioning your loss to a woman sweeping her doorstep. She glances up, shrugs, and mutters something that roughly translates to welcome to town. You tell a local friar. He frowns sympathetically, says a prayer for your misplaced satchel, and suggests perhaps it was God's will. You mention the word stolen to a baker. He laughs so hard he nearly drops a tray of rye bricks, Not because he thinks you're lying, but because, of course, it was stolen. What else did you think would happen? In medieval towns, theft is not an outlier. It's part of a natural order, right up there with mud, poor dental hygiene, and sudden outbreaks of fire. Everyone is poor. Everyone is desperate. And anything you leave unattended is considered up for grabs. That's why locals carry their valuables tied to their belts, tucked in hidden pouches, or quite literally sewn into their clothes. Wealthy merchants often hired boys to shadow them, not as apprentices, but as moving alarms. Even nuns kept a wary eye on their coin purses. Sanctity is no match for scarcity and knives. Those aren't accessories, they're necessities. Every peasant has one. Every merchant carries one. Even small children sometimes carry small blades, not for fighting, but for cutting bread, slicing apples, and if absolutely necessary, making sure someone doesn't take the bread or the apple. Theft wasn't just tolerated. In many cases, it was expected. Eventually, you return to the friary where you've been staying, where you recently recovered from your first medieval stomach catastrophe. You recount the theft again, with a bit more drama this time. You add sorrow. You lean into the tragic tone. Brother Thomas, or maybe it's Brother Matthew, all the monks blur together, listens with polite gravity. He disappears into a side room and returns, placing something into your palm. A knife. It's small, rusted. The blade is dull and the handle is cracked, but it fits in your hand. You try to hand it back. He doesn't let go. He makes a gesture, palm flat, knife up, and walks away. You don't need a full understanding of the local dialect to get the message. Keep it with you, always. Historically speaking, this is not unusual. In fact, for someone in your position, alone, unfamiliar, and extremely muggyable, this is practically a rite of passage. In medieval England, justice didn't work the way modern visitors might hope. While there were courts and laws, actual enforcement was rare and wildly inconsistent. A constable might exist in theory, but his authority was local, his power limited, and his priorities skewed heavily toward protecting landowners, collecting fines, and making sure the tavern didn't turn into a murder pit every Saturday night. You, an unknown foreigner with no local kin or guild membership, are not the kind of person anyone is going to stick their neck out for. Guilds, powerful associations of craftsmen and merchants, protected their own. But outsiders, those not under guild protection or tied into a household, were fair game. And you're not in a guild. You're not from a household. You are a walking opportunity. Markets are the worst. They're crowded, loud, and full of opportunities to get relieved of your belongings. Street performers attract gawkers. Gawkers create crowds. Crowds create cover. And somewhere in that chaos, a cutpurse practices his art. Theft is so common that it's priced into everything. The merchant selling you a dusty apple has already accepted that 3 more will go missing before noon. The baker keeps his coin jar buried in flour. The butcher keeps his cleaver sharp and visible. And when thieves do get caught, well, that depends on who they stole from. Punishments are theatrical, often gruesome, and wildly inconsistent. For minor thefts, public humiliation is common. A thief might be tied to the pillory and pelted with rotten turnips or forced to wear a wooden plaque proclaiming, "I stole a chicken," while being paraded through the streets. Repeat offenders, or those unlucky enough to steal from the wrong person, might lose a hand, an ear, or both. In some places, thieves are branded with hot irons to mark them for life. In others, they're hanged. No trial, no appeal, just a rope and an audience. You quickly realize that while the law is slow to act, it's spectacularly vicious when it does. But here's the important part. Most thieves are never caught because no one is watching and no one really wants to. Your instincts sharpen. You start tying your coin pouch inside your tunic. You walk with your hand over it in crowds. You sleep with it tucked under your ribs. You learn to recognize the signs, someone following too closely, hands hidden under a cloak, questions asked too casually. You also learn the art of preemptive destitution, walking like you have nothing, dressing even shabbier than you are, pretending to limp so thieves assume you're not worth the effort. Your new life strategy, be uninteresting. You meet a man near the baker's stall. He's missing 3 teeth and has a knife scar that runs from jaw to collarbone. He offers you half a cabbage and a story. In exchange, he asks for nothing. You eat the cabbage. You hear the story. You leave with all your belongings. Progress. Not all theft is for survival. Sometimes it's professional. Medieval cities had entire underground economies. Gangs of cutpurses, highwaymen working just outside town, fences operating under the guise of scrap traders. Even churchyards weren't sacred. Pickpockets operated during services because they knew half the congregation was too deep in prayer to notice their purse vanishing. Taverns were prime hunting grounds. Travelers drank more, talked louder, and kept looser hands on their goods. Some innkeepers even encouraged the practice, skimming the unlucky and taking a cut from the thieves in return. You've met at least 3 pickpockets. 2 robbed you. 1 taught you how to walk like someone not worth robbing. That one you almost trust. Almost. By week's end, you've hardened. You don't speak unless you must. You carry your knife, dull though it is, like it matters. You nod instead of smile. You walk wide around beggars, wearing boots nicer than yours. A local calls you wise. You take it as a compliment. You trade a half onion for a crust of bread and what might be sausage. You eat it anyway. And that night, curled behind the friary wall, you sleep with one hand on your pouch and the other on your blade. For the first time since you arrived in this unpredictable, mud-soaked century, you wake up with all your things. You learn your next lesson before you've even finished your breakfast. It happens in a tavern, or what passes for one. The food is warm, the bread nearly fresh, and the stew only mildly offensive. You've started to feel something like confidence. A local woman even smiled at you as she refilled your bowl. For a second, it feels like maybe you're getting the hang of this century. Then you make the mistake of sitting at the wrong table. You pick it because it's near the fire. Your feet are numb, and your clothes still smell like last night's rain. There are 3 other men at the table, all eating, none talking. You assume, in your modern way, that a table is just a table. It is not. The one closest to you stops chewing. The man across from him slowly lowers his spoon. The third, older and broad-shouldered with hands like tree roots, simply stares. He doesn't yell. He just stares. You feel it like heat or frost. You stand up. Nobody tells you why you can't sit there. Nobody needs to. You already know. You're not the same, not in dress, not in posture, not in class. In medieval England, social hierarchy isn't just about power. It's about place, and you're out of yours. You take your stew to a bench by the door. It's colder but safer. You begin to notice it everywhere. The way some people don't step aside when you pass, the way others bow, but only slightly, the tilt of a head, the cut of a tunic, the color of a belt. These aren't fashion choices. They're signals. Class isn't a guess here. It's a script. Everyone plays their part. Lords command. Knights strut. Guildsmen puff their chests. Peasants look down. Servants vanish into the background. Even children know who they're supposed to bow to. It's instinct, cultural muscle memory. And you're a blank page, which is dangerous. You bow too deeply to a merchant's wife. She laughs. Her guards don't. You raise your voice at a servant who shorted you on bread. He spits in your stew, and no one does a thing. You try to explain yourself once out loud to a baker. I didn't know. He looks at you like you're an idiot. Then you shouldn't be here. Fair. Historically speaking, this wasn't rudeness. It was survival. Medieval society was rigid by necessity. There were no resumes, no ID cards, no LinkedIn pages. Your clothes, your speech, your posture, that was your identity. Those were the clues that told others how to treat you. And if you didn't follow the rules, the whole system frayed. Most people were born into their station and died in it. If you were a villain, a kind of unfree peasant, you couldn't just become a merchant. If you were a tanner, you were expected to stay a tanner. The few who climbed ranks usually did so through the church or by military service. And even then, it took a generation or 2. Everyone else stayed firmly in their lane. You meet a man named Will near the blacksmith stall. He looks at you with a kind of exhausted pity and tells you the rules, not all of them. That would take weeks, but enough to keep you from offending the next person you speak to. You don't touch anyone wearing silk, he says. Not even if they're choking. You blink. What if they need help? Then pray for them, he says, from a respectful distance. He explains that colors are codes. Fur-lined cloaks are power. Blue and purple are reserved for nobility. Green is fine, unless it's too fine. And linen, only if it's been washed recently. Yours hasn't. He also tells you this: you've been walking wrong. Apparently, your gait is too loose, too confident. You don't step softly enough, don't lower your head fast enough, don't make space fast enough when a higher-ranked person walks by. You move like someone who's never been hit for moving wrong. He says they'll fix that. And they almost do. That afternoon, you try to get a better spot near the public well. The water's cleanish, and the sun is warm. You step ahead of a girl carrying a heavy pail. She looks about 13, face sunburned, hands raw. An older woman behind her shouts. You don't catch the words, but you get the tone. Everyone looks. You freeze. The girl glares at you with a kind of weary fury and says, "Where's your badge?" You don't have one. Apprentices in town wear pins or stitch symbols. They show you belong to someone. If you don't, you're a stranger. And strangers are beneath everyone. You step back. She doesn't thank you. She shouldn't have to. You start paying attention. You notice that even eye contact is stratified. A noble doesn't look at a merchant. A merchant doesn't look at a peasant. A peasant doesn't look at anyone unless spoken to. And you look at everyone like you're trying to read subtitles. You learn to lower your gaze, to speak less, to speak softer, to say, "My lord," even when it sticks in your throat. Eventually, people stop looking at you with suspicion. Now they look through you, like a servant, like you belong. Progress. There are benefits, strange as it sounds. Being invisible means you overhear things, plans, rumors, prices, secrets. You start to understand the town, not just by its layout, but by its tensions. Who's sleeping with whom? Who's stealing flour? Who's plotting to skip tithes? You become a shadow with ears. You also become tired. It is exhausting to carry the weight of invisibility. You begin to dream of modern things, not for comfort, but for clarity. A line, a menu, a name tag, something to tell you where you stand. Because here, you never quite know. You're not noble. You're not guild. You're not clergy. You're not a peasant. You're not a pilgrim, at least not a convincing one. You're a gap in the system, tolerated but not trusted. A body in borrowed clothing. One night, a boy bumps into you in the dark and mutters, "Watch it, lowborn." You should be angry. You should be indignant. But all you feel is relief. He thinks he knows what you are. That's the closest you've come to belonging. You're sitting on a low stone wall, chewing something that was allegedly bread, when you make the mistake. You're trying to find north. You don't mean to show off. You just want to know where you buried your emergency items in the woods. You dig into the pouch you've sewn into your tunic lining and palm the compass. Just a glance, a peek. It's small, discreet, and blessedly accurate, unlike medieval directions, which seem to be based entirely on how loudly someone can point. Unfortunately, you're not as discreet as you think. A boy passing by stops, eyes wide. "Is that a jewel?" he asks, in something halfway between French and curiosity. You snap the compass shut and shove it back into your tunic, but it's too late. He's already shouting for someone, his uncle, maybe, or a local gossip merchant. Within minutes, you've got a small crowd staring at you like you've grown a second head, and it's singing in Latin. A woman crosses herself. A man mutters about Eastern sorcery. A priest somewhere nearby starts walking your way. You walk away, casually, calmly, absolutely not at a pace that would be considered fleeing. Just brisk. This is your warning. Nothing screams, "Not from here," like pulling out an item no one can name. Even the simplest modern object, a pen, a light, a zipper, a plastic button, can trigger suspicion. Not always because it's terrifying. Sometimes it's just unfamiliar enough to be interesting. And in a town where interesting is one step away from dangerous, that's not a compliment. Remember, the medieval worldview doesn't make space for weird but harmless. Things are either part of the natural order, or they're not. And if they're not, they probably came from the devil or the east or both. Later that afternoon, as you lean against the friary wall, pretending to read a religious carving, the local priest finds you. He's not hostile, just curious. Too curious. He asks where you're from. You say far away. He asks what you do. You say pilgrim. He asks if pilgrims commonly carry compasses that glow slightly in the sun and spin like enchanted beetles. You change the subject. He doesn't. Historically, priests were often the most educated people in town. They could read. They had access to old texts. And, worst of all, they had time. They were also charged with maintaining moral and spiritual order, which, in practice, meant deciding who was a threat. And while witch trials weren't yet in full swing in the 1300s, heretics, sorcerers, and suspicious foreigners were definitely on the radar. The church didn't need proof, just a sense of unease, a few whispers, a failure to attend Mass regularly, or a compass you couldn't explain. That night, you make your way back to the forest, not the edge like before, but deep past the berry bushes and the stinging nettles, past the tree where you tripped last week, and cursed, so loudly the squirrels haven't returned. You find the spot. You dig with a flat stone. Your hands are freezing. Eventually, you uncover your stash, a small tin of waterproof matches, your backup compass, a protein bar, and a laminated card that reads emergency contact. You stare at it. There is no emergency contact here. Just you. You bury the compass again, deeper this time, wrap it in linen. You hesitate, then bury the protein bar too. You don't need it drawing attention. You keep the matches. If someone asks, you'll say the friar taught you flint tricks. You lie well now. In medieval towns, being from somewhere else buys you about 10 minutes of grace. After that, people want details, names, maps, saints. You can't just say, I'm from a distant land, and expect a polite nod. Everyone in medieval Europe is from somewhere, and everyone knows someone who's been there. Slip up once, and people assume you're lying. Slip up twice, and they assume you're dangerous. You've slipped up twice this week alone, so you change tactics. You get quieter. You speak less. You start bowing more. You mutter a lot. If someone asks a question you don't know how to answer, you look pained and say it's a matter of penance. People nod solemnly. Mystery is safer than mistakes. Let's be clear about something. Medieval people are not stupid. They know their world. They know how knives should look, how fabric should stretch, how thread should unravel. They've never seen a seam like the one on your undershirt. You tell them it's a monk's design. They narrow their eyes. Monks don't sew like that. A baker eyes the smooth finish of your boots, modern leather soles, dyed to look crude. Strange tanning, he says. You mumble something about foreign oxen. A merchant fingers the synthetic cord tied around your belt. He tests its strength. What plant makes this? You say it's a rare northern weed. His eyebrows rise. You're running out of lies. Eventually, someone calls you a mystic, not in a complimentary way. It happens after you help a child who scraped his knee. You cleaned it with wine, wrapped it with clean cloth, said nothing magical. But the child got better quickly. Too quickly. A neighbor saw. A neighbor told. Now people think you know things. It's not always dangerous to be called a mystic. Some mystics are tolerated, especially if they're old, quiet, and very religious. But you're none of those things. You're young. You're foreign. And you don't always know which saint to mention when someone sneezes. Here's the real risk. You're interesting. In medieval life, that's rarely good. Interesting people get noticed. Noticed people get questioned. Questioned people get tested. And you don't want to be tested. You start burying more things, not just your gear, but your personality, your stories, your gestures. You practice local slang. You learn which saints are popular. You start dressing more plainly. You pick up a phrase, I go where the Lord leads. It's vague, devout, and confusing enough to stop most questions. You say it a lot. One day in the market, you spot someone else who doesn't belong. She's wearing sandals in winter. Her cloak is too new. She asks the price of a pie in perfect Latin, like a school book come to life. The vendor squints. You step away. She'll learn or she won't. Either way, she's not your problem. By now, your instinct is honed. If something looks shiny, you cover it. If someone stares too long, you walk away. If a priest smiles too warmly, you prepare an escape route. You know which alleys to duck into, which dogs to avoid, which bread stalls don't overcharge pilgrims who ask too many questions. You sleep with your knife. You pray like you mean it. You've told 5 different people you're heading to Santiago. You've never seen a map of Santiago, but you have the conviction of someone who knows not to lose face. And really, that's what survival is now. Not losing face, not looking like a magician, not sounding like a liar, not smelling like modern soap. By the end of the week, you've earned a reputation, quiet, odd, from the East, maybe touched by the saints or something else. But no one tries to burn you. No one drags you before the magistrate. No one digs up your stash. Not yet. And in the Middle Ages, not yet is a kind of victory. You're getting better at disappearing. Not literally, of course. You still walk through the muddy alleys like some underfed ghost in borrowed clothes. But now you've learned to shrink yourself, to round off your modern edges, to stop standing out. Your accent hasn't changed, but your confidence has. You don't speak unless spoken to. You keep your gestures small, your reactions delayed. You don't ask questions. You don't smile too widely. You try, with increasing skill, to become forgettable, and it's working. A merchant actually looked past you today. That, you realize, is a kind of medieval milestone. Let's be clear, blending in doesn't mean you belong. It just means people stop looking too hard. And in the 14th century, invisibility is the only true safety a stranger can buy. It starts with your body. You've lost weight, not that you were heavy to begin with, but now your ribs make cameo appearances. Your gait is slower. You've learned to walk in patterns, to move with the flow of traffic in the market, not against it. You mimic the posture of the tired, the half-bowed humility of someone born to be overlooked. Your clothing helps too. The tunic you traded for a scratchy, mud-stained mess of coarse wool is now faded enough to pass. The patched cloak you wrapped around it no longer smells distinctly not from here, but instead just smells bad, like everyone else. You even dirted your face on purpose this morning. Just a little soot. It works better than a disguise. Clean faces are suspicious. You've learned to speak less and listen more. You understand the rhythm now, not the words necessarily, but the tones, the pauses, the kinds of things people care about. Bread, rain, gossip. The baker's daughter who disappeared for 2 days. The tanner's wife who gave birth to twins again. The rumor that the tax collector's mule was cursed by a beggar. You repeat some of these stories cautiously when the moment calls for it. You don't claim to know things, only that you heard them on the road. No one questions it. Everyone hears things on the road. You also know what not to say. You don't mention prices, measurements, or dates. You never use numbers you're unsure of. You don't say kilometer or coffee or Tuesday unless someone else says it first. You've eliminated phrases like make sense and no problem. You once said sure, and the shoemaker's apprentice looked at you like you'd grown a second head. Now you just say very well and nod. You nod a lot. Sometimes, though, they still look at you sideways. Maybe it's your hands, too clean, too soft. Maybe it's the way you flinch when someone coughs. Maybe it's that you never seem to know where you're going. But more and more, those looks are fleeting. People have better things to worry about than your weirdness, the weather, the bishop's new decree, the rising cost of barley. You're not their problem. You're barely their curiosity. You take that as a victory. You've even found a rhythm to your days. Wake before the bells. Join the line at the friary for watered-down broth. Avoid eye contact with the man who once offered to sell you his wife's hair. Help unload crates at the docks in exchange for half a fish. Return it when you realize it's more maggot than fish. Try again at the baker's. Fail to haggle. Settle for crusts. Eat while sitting on a step, pretending you're just between things. Smile once when a child drops a turnip, and you catch it before it hits the mud. Give it back. She looks at you like you gave her gold. You feel a little more human. You've even gotten used to the smells. Well, not used to, but you've stopped retching. You no longer cover your nose when passing the tannery. You no longer dry heave when the wind carries the scent of a latrine's uphill. You don't gag at the sight of dead animals being flayed in the open air. Now you just squint and walk faster. Progress. Someone calls you pilgrim. It's the first time anyone has said it without skepticism. They ask where you're headed. You reply, Santiago. Then you add, eventually. They nod. Everyone says eventually. They offer you a crust of bread. You thank them in the local dialect. It's the wrong verb tense, but close enough. You're invited to sit. You do for a while. You're not an outsider. You're just another traveler. Someone with sore feet and no coin and stories you're not quite ready to tell. You sit with your back against a wall, eating stale bread beside someone whose name you didn't catch. You share a silence that isn't awkward. You listen to church bells. You watch chickens fight in the mud. You could almost believe you belong here. Almost. But you don't. You miss your shoes. You miss ice. You miss toothpaste and proper bandages and being able to say, I'm hungry, without fearing you'll be robbed or pitted. You miss being understood, not just your words, but your world. The way people used to talk about movies, about weekends, about grocery stores and car trouble and birthday plans. Here, everything is about survival, and survival doesn't have room for small talk. Still, you've adapted. You blend. You survive. You've learned that disappearing isn't just a trick. It's a skill. And tonight, as you curl up in the corner of a friary storeroom, clutching a half-rotted blanket and the last crumb of someone else's kindness, you almost feel like part of the century. You'll never belong. But for now, you are tolerated. And, in the Middle Ages, that's the closest thing to peace. You lie awake on a pile of straw that generously calls itself a bed. Your feet are still filthy. Your tunic clings to your back with the texture of wet burlap. The air is thick, not with warmth, but with that uniquely medieval perfume, with smoke, sweat, and the faintly sour tang of rotting vegetables from the alley outside. You roll onto your side and try to find a spot that doesn't stab you with a straw stalk or brush against the wall crawling with something that probably is legs. You close your eyes. You try to imagine home, not a person, not a place, a faucet. A silver, modern, blessed faucet that pours out cold, clean water whenever you ask. You think about brushing your teeth. You think about flushing toilets. You think about deodorant, shampoo, antibacterial soap. You think about socks. And then the rooster crows. You groan, a sound you now share in common with every groaning joint in your body. And sit up. It's morning again. Somehow, you're still here. Let's take stock. You've survived. Maybe not thrived, maybe not passed as a local, but you've made it through days of filth, fear, fever, and failure. You've scavenged food, faked Latin, invented a backstory, buried your technology, avoided execution so far, and discovered that you can, in fact, sleep through bells, fleas, and curfew patrols, but not all three at once. At this point, the question isn't just how do you survive, it's how do you stop yourself from going insane. Medieval life isn't just hard, it's relentless. It doesn't care if your muscles hurt or if your dignity took a punch that morning. There's no reset button, no weekend, no therapist to unload on. There's only survival, and then more of it. You've learned the rhythms now, the sound of morning prayer bells from the church tower, the way bread smells when it's 3 days from edible, the way to nod just enough to be polite but not enough to look servile, the way people speak when they're not sure you belong but don't care enough to ask. The town has accepted you in the only way medieval towns accept anyone, by ignoring you unless you mess up. And you've come close a few times, too close. That moment when the priest asked where your relic was. That time you almost said, okay, instead of very well. That time you pronounced Ave Maria like a tourist ordering tapas. But each time you adapted. You learned a rule that isn't written down anywhere. Don't be memorable. If people remember you, you're suspicious. If they forget you, you're safe. You've become a walking blur, just another traveler, just another tired face in the market. You've also learned to live without no forks, no change of clothes, no privacy, no expectation of comfort. The most advanced thing you own is a rusted knife and a second-hand sense of danger. Your favorite meal this week was pottage with visible beans. Your proudest moment was successfully not vomiting after drinking water from a bucket that had, until a few minutes earlier, been used to soak feet. Your deepest moment of joy was washing your face in a clean stream and realizing it didn't burn. And somewhere along the way, your body began to adjust. The blisters hardened. The nausea faded. Your ears began to recognize the rhythm of the local dialect. Your eyes adjusted to candlelight. You even started to forget what your phone looked like. There are things no one tells you about time travel, like how boredom becomes a kind of parasite, gnawing at your skull in the slow hours between meals and chores, or how hard it is to go a full week without seeing glass, hearing music, or laughing at something on purpose, or how much of the world used to be lived in silence. No hum of electricity, no engines, just fire, bells, footsteps, and voices. Always voices. And how some part of you, some strange, unevolved sliver of your brain, begins to like it. Not the filth, not the hunger, but the stillness, the clarity. The way that life here strips itself down to raw need. Eat, sleep, work, survive. You think less about emails, less about bills, less about the passive chaos of your own timeline. You think more about the next bowl of soup, the weather, and the man in the corner who's been eyeing your coin pouch too long. But don't get too romantic about it. This isn't a noble past. It's just a hard one. You've seen too many coughs that didn't get better, too many children carrying loads twice their weight, too many bent backs, too many blank stares, too many quiet exits. You understand now, in your bones, that most people didn't live history. They just survived it. Night falls again. You lie on your straw mat, slightly less itchy, slightly more resigned. You hear the familiar shuffle of shoes on stone outside the friary walls. You listen for anything suspicious, just footsteps, fading. You pull your cloak tight. You press your pouch to your chest. You mumble the beginning of a prayer you don't believe, just in case someone's listening. Tomorrow will be the same, cold, hungry, confusing. But tonight, you are not dead. And that, in medieval England, is enough.